My wife's sister presented my errors to senior leadership, showed slides of my failed calculations, got my promotion. I sat through her entire presentation without saying a word. After she finished, I asked one simple question that made the room go silent. Look, I've been through some rough situations in my 32 years on this planet. I once sat through a 4-hour timeshare presentation in Florida just to get a free breakfast buffet that turned out to be stale bagels and something they called juice, but was clearly just orange-flavored sadness. I've survived Thanksgiving dinners where my Uncle Jerry explained cryptocurrency for 3 consecutive hours while my soul slowly left my body. Hell, I even made it through my college roommate's experimental jazz phase, which was less music and more, what if we tortured a saxophone in front of a live audience? But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the psychological warfare I was currently enduring in Conference Room B on this particularly soul-crushing Thursday afternoon. Picture this: a boardroom so quiet you could literally hear the fluorescent lights humming their song of corporate despair, and somewhere in the distance, I swear a spreadsheet was softly weeping. The temperature was set to that special kind of cold that makes you wonder if the AC is actually a cryogenic chamber designed to preserve middle management for future generations. Around the table sat 12 of my colleagues, each one wearing that glazed-over expression that said they'd rather be literally anywhere else, stuck in traffic, getting a root canal, watching paint dry in real time, you name it. And there I was, Daniel Cross, lead financial analyst and apparently today's main course, sitting through what could only be described as a 1-hour public execution disguised as a quarterly review presentation. The executioner? Oh, that would be Amber Lane, my wife's sister, self-proclaimed data visionary, and the human equivalent of a participation trophy that somehow convinced itself it deserved first place. She was standing at the front of the room with her wireless presentation clicker gripped in her hand like she'd just discovered the cure for inflation, world hunger, and my career all in one fell swoop. Her blonde hair was pulled back in one of those aggressively tight ponytails that screamed, "I'm here to destroy lives, and I have the hairspray to prove it," and she'd paired it with a power suit so aggressively red, it looked like she'd mugged a fire engine on her way to work. Every single slide that flashed up on that massive screen behind her was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive corporate warfare. Red circles everywhere, like some deranged teacher had gone absolutely feral with a grading pen. Arrows pointing dramatically at numbers that I knew for a fact were perfectly calculated. Zoom-ins on sections of my financial model that would make a CSI crime scene photographer proud. She'd even added some kind of pulsing highlight effect to really drive home the "look at this idiot's mistakes" vibe she was going for. The presentation was titled Critical Analysis: Identifying and Correcting Forecasting Discrepancies in the Wellington Account Model. Translation: watch me end this man's whole career in Comic Sans. I wanted to clap, honestly. Not because I was impressed with her analytical skills. Those were about as sharp as a bowl of pudding. But because you had to admire the sheer audacity. The woman had stolen my work, twisted it like a pretzel, and was now serving it back to me as evidence of my own incompetence. That takes a special kind of sociopathic creativity that you just don't see every day in your average corporate environment. Each mistake she exposed with theatrical flair was actually a feature of a model I'd spent the last 6 months perfecting while she was busy taking 2-hour lunches and perfecting her "I'm very important" lean against door frames. The nonlinear volatility tracking she called erratic and unprofessional. That was specifically requested by Wellington's chief analyst. The risk assessment parameters she claimed were dangerously optimistic. Those were based on 15 years of historical data and 3 separate validation models. But sure, Amber, by all means, tell everyone how my doctorate in quantitative finance led me to make calculations that a sophomore statistics student could do better. Around the table, reactions varied from mildly uncomfortable to actively enjoying the show. Jenkins from accounting kept shifting in his seat like he desperately needed to pee but was too afraid to miss the drama. Rhonda from HR had her arms crossed and was nodding along like Amber was preaching the gospel according to Excel. And there was Marcus, bless him, my only actual friend in this corporate Thunderdome, who kept catching my eye and mouthing, "What the hell?" every 30 seconds while Amber droned on about fundamental calculation errors. But the real piece of work was sitting at the head of the table, our esteemed director, Paxton Webb. a man whose hairline had retreated so far back it looked like a chart of declining stock prices, and whose management style could best be described as aggressively ambivalent. He was watching Amber's presentation with the kind of intense focus usually reserved for people trying to understand IKEA instructions, occasionally nodding and making little sounds that could mean literally anything from, "This is fascinating," to, "I wonder what's for lunch." Amber clicked to another slide, this one showing a comparison between my flawed projections and her corrected analysis. The corrected analysis was, hilariously, just my original work with 2 decimal places moved and the formatting changed from blue to green. Groundbreaking stuff, really. She might as well have put a different font on the Constitution and claimed she'd written a new founding document. "As you can see," she said, her voice dripping with that special kind of fake concern that people use when they're about to throw you under a bus, but want everyone to think they're doing you a favor. "Daniel's approach shows creative thinking, which we value, but it lacks the rigorous methodology required for a client of Wellington's caliber. I've taken the liberty of restructuring the entire framework to ensure accuracy and reliability." Creative thinking. That was code for "he's an idiot, but I'm too polite to say it directly." And she was stealing my promotion right there in front of me, in front of everyone, while probably already mentally redecorating the office that should have been mine. The presentation finally, mercifully, came to an end after what felt like several geological eras. Amber clicked off the projector with a satisfied smile, the kind of smile a cat gives right after knocking your favorite mug off the counter and maintaining eye contact the whole time. She smoothed down her blazer and looked directly at me with fake sympathy that made my eye twitch. Then Paxton, blessed management oracle that he was, turned his receding hairline in my direction and asked the question I'd been simultaneously dreading and waiting for. "Daniel, you've been awfully quiet through all this. Do you have anything to say in response to these concerns?" The room went silent. Not regular quiet, but that special kind of silence where everyone's holding their breath waiting for someone to either explode or implode, and honestly either option would be entertaining at this point. I could feel 12 pairs of eyes boring into me, waiting to see if I'd crumble, if I'd argue, if I'd have a complete meltdown and flip the conference table like some kind of corporate action hero. I took a slow sip of my coffee, which had gone from lukewarm to cold during Amber's presentation and now tasted like bitter regret with a hint of betrayal. I set the cup down carefully, leaned back in my chair with the casual confidence of a man who'd been holding pocket aces the entire time, and smiled. Not a big smile, just a small one, the kind that suggested I knew something nobody else in the room did. "Just one question," I said. The room froze. Amber's triumphant expression flickered just slightly. And somewhere in the universe, karma started warming up in the bullpen. I wasn't always the guy silently watching his reputation get barbecued over lukewarm coffee while his sister-in-law played executioner with a laser pointer. There was actually a time, believe it or not, when I was what you might call the golden boy of Wellington Financial Analytics. I know. Hard to picture now that I'm basically the corporate equivalent of a piñata, but stick with me here because this story gets worse before it gets better, which is really the American dream in reverse. 6 years ago, I walked into this company fresh out of grad school with my shiny new doctorate in quantitative finance, a head full of complex algorithms, and absolutely zero ability to engage in normal human small talk. I was that guy at company happy hours nursing a single beer for 3 hours while everyone else argued about whether Die Hard was a Christmas movie, and I'd be in the corner calculating the statistical probability of surviving a fall from Nakatomi Plaza. Fun at parties? Not exactly. Good at my job? Absolutely phenomenal. My specialty was building forecasting models so accurate they bordered on witchcraft. While everyone else was still using basic regression analysis and praying to the Excel gods, I was out here constructing neural networks that could predict market movements with the kind of precision that made senior analysts weep into their morning bagels. I didn't schmooze clients over golf games or spend 3 hours at lunch discussing my personal brand. I just did the work, did it brilliantly, and let the numbers speak for themselves. Turns out, in the corporate world, that's like bringing a calculator to a knife fight. Technically superior, but completely missing the point. My wife Mila loved that about me, at least initially. We met during my second year at the company at some charity gala that my boss forced me to attend. She was working in event coordination, I was hiding behind a decorative plant trying to avoid conversation, and somehow we ended up talking about the completely impractical architecture of the venue. She thought my social awkwardness was refreshing and authentic, which I later learned was code for, at least he's not pretending to be someone he's not. We got married 2 years later in a ceremony that was thankfully devoid of surprise PowerPoint presentations, and for a while there, life was pretty solid. Mila appreciated that I was low drama. No office politics, no backstabbing, no coming home and complaining about who stole whose yogurt from the communal fridge. I'd arrive home at 6:15 every evening like clockwork. We'd cook dinner together while I explained whatever mathematical concept I was currently obsessed with, and she'd nod along even though I'm pretty sure she stopped listening after, so the standard deviation. It was comfortable, predictable, and exactly the kind of boring stability that makes sitcom writers want to throw themselves off bridges, but makes actual humans pretty happy. Then Amber happened. Mila's younger sister was everything I wasn't. Loud, charismatic, and blessed with the kind of confidence usually reserved for people who've never experienced consequences for their actions. She'd bounced around between 5 different jobs in 3 years, each time leaving under circumstances she described as creative differences, but which I suspected were more like discovered I actually had to work. When she announced she was applying to Wellington Financial, I figured there was no way she'd get in. The woman's idea of quantitative analysis was calculating how to split a brunch bill 4 ways, and even then she usually got it wrong. But here's the thing about corporate America that nobody tells you when you're busy getting your doctorate. Charisma beats competence about 70% of the time. Amber waltzed into her interview, charmed the pants off Paxton with her vision for dynamic market engagement, or whatever meaningless buzzword salad she served up, and got hired as a junior analyst. This was 4 years ago, 2 years after I'd already established myself as the department's go-to guy for anything involving numbers more complicated than basic arithmetic. Mila was thrilled. "Now you two can carpool," she said, like I'd been secretly wishing for more quality time with someone who once asked me if Excel had spell check. "And you can help Amber learn the ropes. It'll be great for family bonding." Family bonding. Right. Because nothing says quality family time like teaching your sister-in-law that pivot table isn't a type of furniture. I tried, I really did. I'm not a complete monster. When Amber started, I showed her the basic systems, explained our reporting structures, even sat through a painful 2-hour session where I attempted to teach her the difference between correlation and causation. She kept checking her phone, reapplying lip gloss, and asking if we were almost done with the boring stuff. Still, I figured she'd find her groove eventually. Maybe she'd be great at client relations or presentation design, or literally anything that didn't require actual analytical thinking. The problem was that Amber didn't join Wellington Financial to work. She joined to audition. Every meeting was a performance. Every email was crafted like she was writing her Emmy acceptance speech. She treated the office like it was her personal season of Shark Tank, and she was going to get a deal with Mr. Wonderful or die trying. She'd volunteer for high-profile projects she was completely unqualified for, then charm her way into getting other people, usually me, to do the actual work while she handled the strategic vision, which apparently meant showing up to meetings and saying things like, "Let's circle back to that," and "I love the energy here." But family politics are a thing, especially when your wife's parents are constantly asking why you and Amber don't collaborate more, implying that maybe you're threatened by her fresh perspective. Fresh perspective. The woman thought quarterly earnings were called that because they happened 4 times a quarter. But Mila insisted we needed to get along and support each other. So I did what any rational person trying to maintain marital harmony would do. I swallowed my pride and tried to be helpful. The turning point came about 18 months ago. Amber had somehow talked her way onto the Morrison account, a mid-sized client that needed a basic risk assessment model. It was straightforward work, the kind of thing that should take maybe a week if you know what you're doing. 3 weeks in, Amber still hadn't produced anything usable. She'd created 17 different slide decks about her process, but hadn't actually built a functional model. Mila cornered me one evening while I was trying to watch a documentary about the 2008 financial crisis. "Amber's really struggling with this Morrison thing," she said, in that tone that wasn't quite asking, but also wasn't not asking. "Could you maybe just take a look? Give her some pointers, Pointers turned into building her entire model from scratch because her version was basically just a bunch of random numbers formatted to look professional. I gave her full access to my templates, my data sources, my methodology, everything. I figured she'd learn by example, and honestly, I just wanted to get back to my documentary. Big mistake. Enormous. Catastrophic. Like giving scissors to a toddler and hoping they'll cut paper instead of their own hair, the cat, and somehow the structural integrity of your entire home. Amber took that model, slapped her name on it, presented it as her own original work, and got praised by Paxton for her innovative approach to risk stratification. I didn't say anything because what was I going to do? Run to management and complain that my sister-in-law stole my work? That's not low drama Daniel. That's petty guy who can't handle his wife's sister's success Daniel. So I stayed quiet, congratulated her when Mila insisted, and told myself it was a one-time thing. Narrator voice, it was not a one-time thing. The Wellington account wasn't just any client. This was the Mount Everest of financial consulting contracts, the kind of opportunity that comes around maybe once in a career if you're lucky, and twice if you've made some kind of dark pact with the finance gods. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar international investment firm with tentacles in 16 countries, the kind of client that drops more money on quarterly consulting fees than most people see in a lifetime. Landing their business meant CEO attention, board recognition, and a potential raise big enough to finally make my student loans stop, sending me threatening letters written in what I can only assume is the financial equivalent of ancient curses. When Paxton announced in our morning meeting that Wellington was looking for a firm to build them a proprietary predictive model for emerging market volatility, I swear I heard angels singing. Or maybe that was just the coffee machine wheezing in the break room. But either way, this was my moment. Everything I'd been working toward, every late night building algorithms while my college friends were out living their best lives, every conference I'd attended where I was the youngest person in the room by 20 years, it all came down to this. The brief was beautiful in its complexity. Wellington wanted something that could predict market movements before they happened, a model that could analyze thousands of variables simultaneously and identify patterns invisible to traditional analysis. They wanted to see emerging market crashes coming from 3 months out. They wanted to know which tech startups in developing economies would boom and which would bust. Basically, they wanted a crystal ball, but one backed by rigorous mathematical proof and peer-reviewed methodology. In other words, they wanted exactly what I'd been building in various forms for the past 6 years. I spent 2 weeks crafting the proposal, barely sleeping, living on a diet of coffee and whatever food Mila forced into my hands when she caught me working at 3 in the morning. I built neural networks that would make MIT professors jealous. I incorporated machine learning algorithms that adapted in real time to market conditions. I created visualization dashboards so intuitive that even Paxton could understand them, which was saying something because the man once asked if algorithmic trading meant the algorithm was doing the actual buying and selling, like it had its own brokerage account and tiny algorithm hands. The model I designed was genuinely revolutionary, and I'm not just saying that because I built it. It used something called stochastic differential equations combined with sentiment analysis from 17 different global news sources, filtered through a proprietary weighting system I developed that accounted for regional economic indicators, historical precedent, and about 40 other variables that would take me another 3 paragraphs to explain. The point is, it worked. In backtesting, it predicted market movements with 87% accuracy, which in the world of financial forecasting is basically like predicting lottery numbers. I submitted the proposal on a Friday afternoon, felt pretty damn good about myself, went home, and actually had a normal weekend for once. Mila and I went to some farmer's market where I bought overpriced artisanal cheese and pretended to care about the difference between heirloom tomatoes and regular ones. Life was good. I was going to nail this presentation, get the promotion, maybe finally buy a car made in this decade. Then Monday morning rolled around and Paxton called me into his office with that look on his face that managers get when they're about to ruin your day, but frame it as an opportunity for growth. Daniel, fantastic work on the Wellington proposal. He started, which should have been my first warning sign because Paxton complimenting anyone was like seeing a unicorn. Technically possible, but deeply suspicious. Really fantastic. The technical specifications are exactly what they're looking for. I waited for the other shoe to drop. In corporate America, Compliments are just the appetizers before the main course of disappointment. Now, Wellington is very particular about client relations, Paxton continued, leaning back in his chair that probably cost more than my monthly rent. They want someone who can interface with their executive team, handle the presentation aspects, really sell the vision alongside the technical specs. Right? I said slowly. I can do presentations. I've done dozens of. We're assigning Amber as your collaborator on this one. And there it was. The other shoe, dropping like an anvil in a cartoon, flattening all my hopes and dreams into a two-dimensional pancake of corporate politics. Amber, I repeated, because surely I'd misheard. Maybe he said, amber, like the color, and we were redecorating the presentation slides. Maybe he said, Amber Alert, and was warning me about something. Anything other than what he actually said. She's got great client-facing skills, Paxton explained, like this made any sense at all. Really knows how to work a room. You two will make an excellent team. Your technical expertise and her interpersonal finesse. Interpersonal finesse. That was one way to describe someone whose main skill was talking confidently about things she didn't understand. I wanted to argue, to point out that Amber's idea of technical expertise was knowing how to change the toner in the printer, but Paxton had that look that said the decision was already made, and this conversation was just a courtesy to make me feel like I had a say in my own professional execution. She'll handle the client meetings and presentations, Paxton continued. You focus on building the model, making sure everything's technically sound. Play to your strengths, right? Translation: shut up, do the math, and let Amber take the glory. But what was I going to do? This was still the Wellington account. This was still my chance at that promotion, that raise, that sweet validation that I wasn't just some socially awkward numbers guy destined to crunch data in obscurity until I retired and became that old guy at parties who corners people to talk about the beauty of statistical modeling. So I smiled, nodded, and said, sure, sounds like a great partnership. Narrator voice: it was not a great partnership. The project kicked off the following week, and I immediately understood the dynamic we were working with. I would spend 18-hour days refining the model, testing scenarios, debugging code, and optimizing performance. Amber would show up to meetings with Wellington's team, flash her pageant smile, and say things like, our innovative approach to market prediction, and we've developed a groundbreaking methodology, while gesturing vaguely at slides I'd created at 4 in the morning. I didn't mind at first, honestly. I told myself that everyone has a role to play, and if her role was being the face of the operation while I was the brain, well, that was fine. I'm not naturally comfortable in client meetings anyway. I have this unfortunate tendency to get too deep into technical explanations, and before I know it, I'm 45 minutes into explaining the mathematical proof behind Brownian motion while my audience's eyes have glazed over like donuts. Amber, meanwhile, could charm anyone. She'd walk into Wellington's boardroom, and let me tell you, their boardroom made our office look like a storage closet, wearing designer suits that probably cost more than my car, and within minutes she'd have their senior analysts eating out of her hand. She remembered their kids' names, asked about their golf handicaps, laughed at their jokes that weren't funny. She was good at the game in a way I'd never be. The model came together beautifully over the next 3 months. Every test I ran exceeded expectations. The accuracy rates were climbing. Wellington's chief analyst, Dr. Patel, kept sending emails with subject lines like impressive results and exactly what we needed. I figured, fine, let Amber bask in the reflected glory. The numbers don't lie, and when this thing goes live and starts making Wellington obscene amounts of money, everyone will know who actually built it. Spoiler alert, I was adorably naive. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning with the subject line, Wellington Account Review Meeting, Mandatory Attendance, which is corporate speak for clear your calendar or clear your desk. I was 3 coffees deep into debugging a minor issue with the model's Asian market parameters when I saw it, sent by Paxton at 7:30 in the morning because apparently sleep is for people without middle management anxiety. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. in Conference Room B, which was the fancy one with the big screen and the chairs that didn't squeak when you moved, reserved for either impressing clients or destroying careers. I assumed it was the former. Looking forward to presenting our final results to the team, Amber had replied all within literally 90 seconds, with enough exclamation points to trigger a punctuation warning. So excited to share what we've accomplished. We, our. What a generous use of plural pronouns for someone whose biggest contribution to the project was correctly spelling Wellington in her emails about 60% of the time. I should have known something was wrong when Amber started acting weird on Wednesday. She was always hovering around my desk, asking pointed questions about specific sections of the model with this strange intensity that felt less like curiosity and more like a lawyer deposing a witness. So this volatility tracking section, she'd say, peering over my shoulder at my screen with the subtlety of a hawk eyeing a field mouse. You're absolutely certain about these calculations? Like, you triple-checked them? Yes, Amber. I'd replied, not looking up from my work. I've been doing this for 6 years. I know how to check my calculations. Right, of course, she'd said. But there was something in her tone that felt off, like she was filing away information for later use. It's just that these numbers seem really aggressive. Bold, you know? Very bold choices. Bold choices. That should have been my second warning sign, right after the mandatory meeting email. When someone in corporate America starts calling your work bold, they're usually setting up to call it reckless about 5 minutes later. Thursday arrived with all the ominous energy of storm clouds gathering before a tornado. I showed up to conference room B 15 minutes early because punctuality is one of my few marketable personality traits, and found the room already half full. Jenkins from accounting was there, nervously organizing his pens by color. Rhonda from HR sat in the corner with her tablet, which was never a good sign because HR only took notes when someone was about to get documentation for a file. Marcus gave me a subtle head shake when I walked in, the universal bro signal for something's wrong, but I don't know what. The senior team filed in over the next 10 minutes. Paxton with his tragic hairline, our CFO Sandra Chun, who looked like she'd rather be literally anywhere else, and even Gerald Morrison, the CEO, which made my stomach drop because Gerald only showed up to meetings that were either extremely good news or catastrophically bad news, and given Amber's weird behavior, I wasn't betting on the former. Then Amber made her entrance. She strutted in wearing heels so sharp they could probably be classified as weapons in several states, paired with a power suit so aggressively red it looked like she'd mugged a fire engine and then had it professionally tailored. Her blonde hair was pulled back in one of those ponytails so tight I was concerned about her blood circulation, and she was carrying a leather portfolio that definitely cost more than my monthly student loan payment. She smiled at everyone like she was about to accept an Oscar, did this weird little wave at the CEO like they were old friends they'd met exactly once, and set up her laptop at the front of the room with the confidence of someone who'd never experienced consequences. Thank you all for coming, she began, and my internal alarm system started blaring like a submarine about to implode. This was supposed to be our presentation. She'd insisted on that plural pronoun for 3 months, and now suddenly it was just her thanking everyone. I know we're all busy, so I'll get right to it, Amber continued, clicking to her first slide. The title appeared on the screen, Critical Analysis, Identifying and Correcting Forecasting Discrepancies in the Wellington Account Model. I'm sorry, what? My brain needed a solid 3 seconds to process what I was seeing because surely I'd misread it. Critical analysis? Discrepancies? This was supposed to be a celebration of our successful model, a victory lap before full implementation. I looked at Marcus, who looked at me with the expression of someone watching a car crash in slow motion. Jenkins had stopped organizing his pens. Even Paxton looked confused, which was saying something because confusion was basically his default state. Amber clicked to the next slide, and there it was, a screenshot of my model with red circles drawn around perfectly correct calculations like a teacher grading a failing exam. Big, aggressive red circles that screamed, "This is wrong," in visual form. I'd like to address some concerning deviations in Daniel's forecasting model, she said, her voice dripping with fake concern so thick you could spread it on toast. She actually placed her hand on her chest like she was physically pained to be doing this. As his collaborator, I've had a front row seat to his process, and while I've tried to address these issues privately, I believe they're serious enough to warrant team discussion. The room temperature seemed to drop about 15 degrees. Everyone's attention swiveled to me like I'd just been accused of embezzlement. I sat there, coffee cup frozen halfway to my mouth, trying to process what was happening. This wasn't a presentation. This was a public execution, and I was the guest of dishonor. She made it sound like I'd accidentally crashed the global economy instead of building what was arguably the most sophisticated forecasting model Wellington had ever commissioned. Every slide was a new attack wrapped in corporate speak and false sympathy. Daniel's creative approach, she'd say, which everyone in that room knew was code for "this idiot doesn't know what he's doing." His unconventional methodology, meaning he's making it up as he goes. His aggressive risk parameters, translating to he's going to bankrupt our client and possibly trigger an international incident. My personal favorite was when she threw in this absolute gem. Daniel is a creative thinker, and we value that innovation here at Wellington Financial. We really do. But sometimes creativity crosses the line into chaos, and I think we've reached that point. Chaos. She actually said chaos. Like I was some kind of mad scientist building models in my basement while cackling maniacally, not a doctorate-holding analyst with 6 years of proven success. The only chaotic thing in this room was her confidence-to-competence ratio, which was so wildly skewed it should have been studied by mathematicians as proof that infinity actually exists. For 60 excruciating minutes, she systematically demolished every aspect of my work with the precision of a surgeon and the mercy of a honey badger. She questioned my data sources, the same sources Wellington specifically requested. She criticized my volatility calculations, which were based on peer-reviewed academic research. She even suggested that my visualization dashboards were unnecessarily complex, which was rich coming from someone who once asked me if we could just make the numbers bigger so they look more impressive. The entire time, I sat there sipping increasingly cold coffee like a man attending his own roast at a comedy club, except none of this was funny and I hadn't agreed to be here. People were taking notes. Rhonda was typing furiously on her tablet. Sandra Chun kept glancing at me with this expression that wasn't quite pity, but was definitely in the same neighborhood. Even Gerald looked concerned, and that man had the emotional range of a particularly stoic brick. When Amber finally clicked to her conclusion slide, recommended actions, complete model restructuring with enhanced oversight, I realized what this really was. This wasn't about fixing problems. This was a coup. She was going to take over the entire project, get the credit, get the promotion, and leave me looking like the incompetent idiot who couldn't build a functional model without adult supervision. The presentation mercifully ended, and Amber stood there basking in the aftermath like she'd just delivered a TED Talk that would change the world. The silence was so thick you could have cut it with a knife and served it at a funeral. Then Paxton turned to me with the expression of someone who'd rather be getting dental surgery without anesthesia. "Daniel," he said carefully, "you've been awfully quiet through all this. Do you have anything to say in response to these concerns?" The silence in that room was the kind you usually only experience right before a natural disaster hits. Thick, oppressive, and loaded with the sense that everything's about to change in a really dramatic way. 12 pairs of eyes were locked on me like I was a defendant waiting to hear a verdict, and honestly, the way Amber had just spent an hour roasting my professional reputation, I might as well have been. My coffee had gone from lukewarm to actively cold, probably out of sympathy for what it assumed was my imminent career death. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to be humming with anticipation, or maybe that was just the tinnitus from suppressing my rage for 60 consecutive minutes. Paxton was looking at me with this expression that I can only describe as, "Please don't make this worse," which was hilarious considering I wasn't the one who'd just committed professional murder via PowerPoint. Sandra Chun had her pen poised over her notepad like she was ready to document my final words for the company archives. Rhonda from HR had that look she gets when she's mentally calculating how many forms she'll need to fill out depending on how this conversation goes. And Gerald Morrison, our CEO, who probably made more in a day than I'd make in a year, was studying me with the cold, analytical stare of someone who'd built a financial empire by knowing exactly when someone was bluffing. Amber, meanwhile, was standing at the front of the room with this smile that was probably supposed to look sympathetic but came across more like a cat that had just cornered a mouse and was deciding whether to play with it before the kill. Her red power suit practically glowed with triumph. She'd just delivered what she thought was a flawless assassination of my credibility, and now she was waiting for me to either crumble into apologetic pieces or dig myself deeper with some desperate defense that would only make me look worse. Here's the thing about being underestimated your entire career. People forget you're actually good at what you do. They see the quiet guy who doesn't schmooze at happy hour, who'd rather run regression analyses than network, who brings the same lunch from home every day like some kind of creature of habit, and they assume you're soft. They assume you won't fight back. They assume you'll just take it when someone tries to torpedo your career because confrontation makes you uncomfortable. They're not entirely wrong. Confrontation does make me uncomfortable. But you know what makes me more uncomfortable? Watching someone steal 6 months of my work and serve it back to me as evidence of my incompetence. I took one more sip of my terrible cold coffee, set it down with deliberate care, and leaned back in my chair with the casual energy of someone who'd just been dealt a royal flush and was trying really hard not to smile. The movement caught everyone's attention even more, if that was possible. Marcus leaned forward slightly, sensing something was about to happen. Jenkins had actually stopped breathing, which seemed medically concerning, but was probably just his natural response to workplace drama. "Daniel?" Paxton prompted again, sounding increasingly nervous. "Any response to the concerns Amber has raised?" I let the question hang there for exactly 3 seconds longer than was comfortable, watching Amber's confident smile start to flicker just slightly at the edges. Her left eye did this tiny twitch that I recognized from family dinners when someone was about to contradict one of her stories. She wasn't quite nervous yet, but there was a hairline crack forming in that armor of absolute certainty. "Just one question," I said finally, keeping my voice calm and pleasant, like I was asking about weekend plans instead of preparing to dismantle her entire presentation. The room somehow got even quieter. I'm pretty sure Jenkins actually did stop breathing this time. I turned my attention fully to Amber, making direct eye contact for the first time since her presentation started. If my calculations are so fundamentally flawed, so reckless and chaotic, can you explain why Wellington International specifically requested this exact model in their original project brief? Her smile froze like someone had hit pause on a video, just completely locked in place while her brain scrambled to process what I'd just said. I could practically see the gears turning behind her eyes, trying to figure out if I was bluffing, if I was confused, if maybe I'd finally snapped and was just making things up. "I'm sorry," she managed, her voice losing about 30% of its confident lilt. "The project brief," I continued, reaching into my bag with the calm deliberateness of a poker player revealing his cards. "The one Wellington sent when they commissioned this work. The one that very specifically outlines what they wanted." I pulled out a printed copy of the original brief, all 47 pages of it, which I'd been carrying around like a security blanket ever since Amber started acting weird yesterday. I'd printed it on a hunch, that little voice in the back of your head that whispers, "Cover your ass," when something feels off. Thank God for paranoia. "Page 17, Section 3, I said, flipping to the exact page and sliding the document across the conference table toward Paxton. The sound of paper on wood was the only noise in the room. Wellington specifically requested what they termed nonlinear volatility tracking with adaptive parameters. That's a direct quote. The exact methodology that Amber just spent 15 minutes calling nonsense and chaos. Paxton picked up the brief like it might explode. His eyes scanned the page, and I watched his expression shift from confused to surprised to something that looked suspiciously like anger. Sandra Chun leaned over to read along with him, her eyebrows climbing steadily toward her hairline. "The client's exact words," I continued, "because when you've got momentum, you don't stop," were that they wanted a model that could adapt in real time to market fluctuations using sophisticated stochastic modeling. They even cited 3 academic papers as examples of the approach they were looking for. I used all 3 as foundational research for my calculations. Amber's face had gone from confident red suit power to a shade of pale that suggested her circulatory system was having second thoughts about her life choices. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out except a sound like, but the risk parameters she called dangerously optimistic. I kept going, because honestly, this felt too good to stop. Page 22, Section 7. Wellington explicitly stated they wanted forward-looking projections that account for positive market trends, not conservative estimates. Their words, not mine. I pulled out another document, my original proposal with Wellington's approval signatures and margin notes. And here's Dr. Patel's feedback from Wellington's research division. He calls the volatility tracking precisely what we commissioned, and the risk framework appropriately calibrated to our specifications. Gerald Morrison held out his hand for the documents without saying a word. He read them with the slow, careful attention of someone who'd built a career on knowing when someone was trying to con him. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds. When he finally looked up, his eyes went straight to Amber. "Ms. Lane," he said, his voice carrying that particular quality of corporate disappointment that makes grown adults want to curl up and hide. "Can you explain this discrepancy?" Amber's left eye had graduated from a slight twitch to a full-blown spasm. Her confidence had drained faster than office Wi-Fi during lunch hour when everyone's streaming videos. She looked at the documents, then at me, then back at the documents like they might somehow rearrange themselves into something that supported her narrative. "Well, I was only concerned about the accuracy," she stammered, her voice now missing all that smooth presentation polish. "I mean, even if the client requested it, we have a responsibility to ensure that." "To ensure that what?" Sandra Chin cut in, and I'd never loved our CFO more than in that moment. "That we ignore the client's explicit requirements? That we override the specifications from their chief analyst?" Paxton was looking at his own copy of the brief now, and I could see the realization dawning on his face that he'd just sat through an hour-long presentation that was either based on complete incompetence or deliberate sabotage. Neither option made him look good for allowing it to happen. Marcus caught my eye from across the table and gave me the subtlest fist pump I've ever seen. Jenkins had resumed breathing and was now grinning like he'd just witnessed the greatest thing in corporate history. Even Rhonda from HR had stopped typing and was watching Amber with the expression of someone who'd just watched a house of cards collapse in real time. "Ladies and gentlemen, we had liftoff." The thing about corporate vindication is that it doesn't happen in a sudden, dramatic explosion like in the movies. There's no slow-motion shot of the villain getting led away in handcuffs while inspirational music plays. No, in real corporate America, revenge is served cold, bureaucratic, and with an overwhelming amount of follow-up emails that all need to be replied to with per my previous email energy. The meeting ended with Gerald Morrison doing that thing where powerful people stand up without saying anything, and everyone immediately knows the conversation is over. He collected the documents I'd provided, my safety net of paranoid documentation, and walked out with Paxton scrambling behind him like a puppy who knows he's about to get scolded for peeing on the expensive rug. Sandra Chin lingered just long enough to give me a nod that clearly said, "Well played," before following them out. The rest of the team filed out in uncomfortable silence, except for Marcus, who waited until Amber left before giving me a full fist bump and whispering, "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed in this hellhole." Amber herself practically ran out of that conference room, her designer heels clicking against the floor with the frantic rhythm of someone whose fight-or-flight response had firmly chosen flight. Her red power suit didn't look quite so powerful anymore, more like a target she'd painted on herself. I caught a glimpse of her face as she left, and if looks could kill, I'd have been filing for life insurance. But here's the thing about attempted career murder. When you miss, you better be ready for the consequences. I went back to my desk, opened my email, and did what any reasonable person would do after professionally eviscerating their sister-in-law in front of the entire senior management team. I ordered lunch from that Thai place that's definitely too expensive for a regular Thursday, but felt appropriate for a celebration. Pad Thai never tasted so good as when seasoned with the sweet, sweet flavor of vindication. By the next morning, the fallout had officially begun. I arrived at the office at my usual time, 7:45, because I'm predictable like that, to find that Paxton had already scheduled an emergency conference call with Wellington's lead researcher, Dr. Patel. This was the guy who'd been our primary contact throughout the project, a genuine genius with a PhD from Cambridge and the kind of calm, measured demeanor that made you trust everything he said. If Dr. Patel said your model was good, your model was good. If he said it was garbage, you started updating your resume. The call was scheduled for 8:30, which gave me just enough time to brew a proper pot of coffee and mentally prepare for what I assumed would be either my complete exoneration or the discovery that I'd somehow been wrong about everything and would need to move to a different country out of shame. Corporate anxiety is fun like that. Gerald Morrison joined the call personally, which told me this had escalated way beyond a simple project review. Paxton was there looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight, which frankly was an improvement on his usual expression. Sandra Chun participated from what looked like her car, apparently considering this important enough to dial in during her commute. And Amber was notably, gloriously absent. Dr. Patel, thank you for making time on short notice. Gerald opened, using his smooth CEO voice that probably cost him thousands in executive coaching. We wanted to clarify some questions that have arisen regarding the Wellington account model specifications. There was a brief pause, and then Dr. Patel's crisp British accent came through the speakers. Of course, though I must say, I'm rather surprised there are questions. Daniel's model is precisely what we commissioned. Exemplary work, really. I didn't pump my fist in the air, but it was a close call. Gerald continued. We had some internal concerns raised about the methodology, specifically the volatility tracking and risk parameters. Concerns? Dr. Patel sounded genuinely confused, which was deeply satisfying. From whom? Not from anyone who actually read our project brief, surely. Those specifications were quite explicit. We spent 6 months developing them with our research team before we even approached your firm. Paxton shifted uncomfortably in his chair, producing a squeak that sounded like a small animal in distress. There were questions about whether the approach was perhaps too aggressive. Aggressive? Dr. Patel actually laughed, which I don't think I'd ever heard him do before. Mr. Webb, we're not investing in treasury bonds here. We specifically sought out a model that could handle emerging market volatility with sophisticated adaptive algorithms. Conservative projections are useless to us. We can get those from any first-year analyst with Excel. What Daniel built is precisely the kind of forward-thinking analysis we need. Frankly, it exceeds our expectations. Gerald leaned back in his chair, looking directly at Paxton with an expression that suggested someone's performance review was going to be very interesting this year. That's very helpful clarification, Dr. Patel. We appreciate your time. After the call ended, Gerald stayed on the line. Daniel, stay? Everyone else, we're done here. The virtual meeting room cleared faster than a bar at last call. Suddenly, it was just me and the CEO, which was either very good or spectacularly bad, and I genuinely couldn't tell which. I've read through your proposal documents thoroughly, Gerald said, pulling up something on his screen. And I've reviewed the presentation from yesterday. Walk me through what happened. So I did. I gave him the whole story. The Morrison account where I'd foolishly helped Amber, how she'd been assigned to Wellington as my collaborator, the 3 months of me doing the actual work while she handled the meetings. I kept it professional, stuck to facts, didn't editorialize about her competence or lack thereof. When I finished, Gerald was quiet for a moment. Then he said, she tried to take credit for your work by discrediting you first. Classic move. Stupid, but classic. Yes, sir. You'll be taking over the Wellington account solo. Amber is being reassigned to a different team effective immediately. He paused. We're also creating a new senior analyst position. If you're interested, it's yours. Comes with a substantial raise and your own team. I had to physically stop myself from doing a victory dance in my desk chair. I'm very interested. Thank you. Don't thank me. You earned it. Just do me a favor and actually delegate sometimes. Can't have my senior analysts burning out before 40. The call ended, and I sat there for a solid minute just processing what had happened. I'd gone from public humiliation to promotion in less than 24 hours. This was the corporate equivalent of getting knocked down in the first round and coming back with a knockout punch in the second. The news spread through the office faster than rumors about free donuts in the break room. By lunch, everyone knew Amber had been reassigned to some back-end reporting position that was basically corporate Siberia. Marcus brought cupcakes to my desk, just because. Even Jenkins stopped by to tell me he'd always believed in my methodology, which was definitely not true, but I appreciated the sentiment. My phone stayed suspiciously quiet all day. No congratulations text from Mila. No calls. Nothing. That was fine. I'd deal with the home front later. Right now, I was enjoying my first drama-free afternoon in months. That night, I got home around 7 to find Mila sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop, a glass of wine, and the expression of someone who'd been practicing a speech all day. Congratulations on the promotion, she said with all the enthusiasm of someone congratulating a parking ticket on being successfully issued. Thanks. I replied carefully, setting down my bag and trying to read the room. The room was reading hostile with a chance of uncomfortable conversations. Amber called me. Ah, there it was. She's pretty upset. I imagine she is. She said you humiliated her in front of the entire senior team. Mila's tone had that edge that wives develop when they're trying to be fair but are definitely taking someone's side, and it wasn't mine. I poured myself a glass of water, took a breath, and turned to face her. Amber spent an hour trying to destroy my career with a presentation full of incorrect accusations. I simply pointed out that she was wrong. With documentation. That's not humiliation, that's fact-checking. She was just trying to ensure quality control. Mila. I cut her off, which I almost never did. She didn't read the project brief. She didn't understand the client requirements. She tried to take credit for my work by making me look incompetent. That's not quality control. That's sabotage. We stared at each other across the kitchen, and I could see her mentally calculating whether defending her sister was worth the argument she could sense coming. She's family, Mila finally said. So am I replied. And I'd appreciate it if my wife could maybe be happy that I didn't just lose my job. She sighed, took a long sip of wine, and we agreed to table the discussion for later, which in marriage language means we're both mad but too tired to fight about it properly. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling while Mila fake slept on the other side, I realized that winning at work doesn't always mean winning at home. But I take it. You know that feeling when you win something big and you're riding high on the adrenaline of victory, thinking you've finally caught a break, and then the universe looks at you and says, "Hold my beer." Yeah, that's where I found myself about 2 weeks after my triumphant Wellington vindication. Because apparently, in the corporate world, defeating your enemies just means they upgrade their tactics from publicly embarrassing to covertly destructive, and honestly, I should have seen it coming. It started small, the way most horror stories do. I came into work on a random Wednesday morning, grabbed my usual coffee from the break room, black, no sugar, because I'm boring like that, and settled in at my desk to review the latest Wellington data. I opened my project folder and found exactly nothing. Not corrupted files, not misplaced documents, just an empty folder staring back at me like the void itself had developed a taste for financial models. My first thought was that I'd opened the wrong folder, because surely I hadn't just lost 3 weeks of work on the Wellington expansion project. I checked my recent files, my desktop, my downloads folder, nothing. Gone. Vanished. Thanos snapped out of existence. My heart rate jumped from resting to, "Oh God, what have I done?" in about 3 seconds flat. Fortunately, because I'm paranoid and have trust issues that would make a conspiracy theorist look chill, I'd backed everything up to the company cloud server the night before. Crisis averted. I restored the files, chalked it up to some weird computer glitch, and went about my day thinking the tech gods had briefly forgotten I existed. 2 days later, I opened my quarterly forecast presentation for the board meeting and found that every single chart had been flipped upside down. Not rotated, not corrupted, literally inverted, so all my growth projections looked like catastrophic declines and vice versa. It was like someone had taken my presentation and run it through a funhouse mirror. Except this wasn't fun, and the only thing reflected was my growing rage. I fixed it, double-checked everything 17 times, and saved multiple backup copies across different platforms, because at this point I was pretty sure I was either losing my mind or someone was actively screwing with me. Given my recent history with a certain red suit-wearing sociopath, I had a pretty good guess which one it was. The following Monday, I tried to log into my computer and got a message that my password was incorrect. I tried again, incorrect. A third time, account locked for security reasons, please contact IT. I'd used the same password for 2 years, and suddenly my muscle memory was gaslighting me? I don't think so. I trudged down to the IT department, which was located in the basement like we were working in some kind of tech dungeon, and found my buddy Jin surrounded by approximately 40 monitors and what looked like the contents of a Radio Shack that had exploded. Jin was one of those IT guys who treated computers like they were sentient beings deserving of respect and treated humans like necessary annoyances who kept breaking said computers. "Let me guess," he said without looking up from whatever digital surgery he was performing, "login issues?" "How'd you know?" "Because you're the third person this week with mysterious account problems, and the other 2 also happen to work on high-profile projects." He finally looked at me, adjusting his glasses that were perpetually sliding down his nose. "Someone's been playing with the authentication system." "Can you tell who?" Jin's fingers flew across his keyboard with the speed of someone who'd learned to type before they learned to walk. "Technically, no. The logs are clean. But he pulled up something that looked like the Matrix had a baby with an Excel spreadsheet. There's been unusual access patterns from a terminal in conference room C. Late nights, weekends. Someone who shouldn't be here is definitely here. Conference room C was right next to the back-end reporting bullpen where Amber had been reassigned. Coincidence? In a world where gravity exists and water is wet, maybe. In this office? Absolutely not. I fixed my login, changed my password to something that would take a supercomputer about 1,000 years to crack, and went back to my desk feeling like I was developing a legitimate paranoid personality disorder. The problem with paranoia is that sometimes you're actually right, and being right doesn't make you feel better. It just makes you more paranoid. That night, I did something I'm not particularly proud of. I started keeping physical backups of everything. I'm talking printed documents, external hard drives hidden in my desk drawer, USB sticks in my gym bag. I became that guy who saves 17 versions of the same file with increasingly elaborate naming conventions like Wellington _model _final _v3 actual final for real this time. I was sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, jolting awake at 2 in the morning convinced I'd forgotten to back up something crucial. Mila noticed, obviously, because subtle I am not. "You're being paranoid," she said one evening while I was backing up files at 11 p.m. instead of, sleeping like a normal human being. "I'm being prepared," I corrected, clicking save for the 18th time. "Amber's not even on your team anymore. She's in a completely different department. You won. Can you please just let it go? Let it go." Right. Because people who try to destroy your career with PowerPoint definitely just accept defeat gracefully and move on with their lives. That's definitely how vindictive people work. I didn't bother arguing because Mila had made it crystal clear that she considered the whole Wellington incident resolved, and any continued concerns about her sister were just me being unable to move forward. Family loyalty is a hell of a drug, and my wife was apparently mainlining it. The weirdness continued for another week. Files mysteriously moving folders, email drafts disappearing, my desk chair adjusted to a height that suggested someone who wasn't me had been sitting in it. I started coming in earlier, leaving later, basically treating the office like a crime scene that I needed to monitor personally. Then Jin called me down to IT again on a Friday afternoon with the kind of urgency in his voice that suggested either something was very wrong or very interesting, possibly both. "She's been accessing your files," he said when I arrived, pulling up logs that looked like digital hieroglyphics to my non-IT brain. "We're trying to. Your security settings keep blocking her, but she's definitely attempting to get into your project folders. Can you prove it's her?" "Not definitively. She's using a guest login that doesn't officially exist, which is either impressive or concerning depending on your perspective." He scratched his head, making his already messy hair look like he'd been electrocuted. "But she screwed up yesterday. Left a session open in conference room C. The login trail leads back to her employee ID. Can we report this?" Jin gave me a look that suggested I'd just asked if we could report that water was wet. Report what? That someone maybe possibly accessed files they might have had legitimate reasons to access? Without concrete proof of malicious intent, IT security won't do anything. Corporate politics, man. I left the IT dungeon feeling like I was trapped in some kind of corporate psychological thriller where the villain had already been defeated but refused to die. Like I was in a horror movie and had forgotten that you always need to double-tap the zombie or it comes back for the sequel. That weekend, I did what any rational person would do when they suspect they're being sabotaged. I deep dove into LinkedIn stalking. I pulled up Amber's profile, which she updated with the frequency of someone running for office, and that's when I saw it. Thrilled to announce my new position as Director of Strategic Forecasting at Criterion Analytics. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Criterion Analytics, our biggest competitor, the firm that had been trying to poach Wellington as a client for the past 2 years. And Amber had just waltzed into a director position, a title that definitely hadn't existed before, doing specifically the work I was known for. The announcement was 2 days old, which meant while I'd been paranoid about file tampering and login issues, she'd been interviewing with the competition. The tech sabotage wasn't petty revenge, it was intelligence gathering. She'd been trying to steal my methodologies, my models, my actual work to take with her to Criterion. I sat there on my couch, laptop burning my thighs, while Mila watched some reality show about people buying houses they definitely couldn't afford. My forecasting model had predicted market trends with 87% accuracy. Somehow I'd failed to predict that my sister-in-law was essentially committing corporate espionage. "Everything okay?" Mila asked during a commercial break. "Just work stuff," I replied, because how do you tell your wife that her sister just joined your biggest competitor and has probably been stealing proprietary information? You don't. You bottle it up like a functional adult and wait for the inevitable explosion. I closed my laptop and smiled. "Actually, everything's fine." Narrator voice. Everything was not fine. My model had been right about one thing, though. I'd predicted a storm was coming. I just hadn't realized I was going to be standing in the middle of it holding nothing but an umbrella made of corporate policy and increasingly questionable life choices. There's a special kind of anger that transcends normal human emotion. It's not the hot, explosive rage that makes you punch walls or send emails you immediately regret. No, this is the cold, calculated fury that makes you meticulously plan someone's professional demise with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker and the vindictive satisfaction of a supervillain who's finally figured out the hero's weakness. And let me tell you, when I saw the announcement for the National Financial Forecasting Conference with Amber's face plastered across the promotional material, I achieved that special level of zen-like rage that probably should have concerned me, but instead felt oddly empowering. The email invitation landed in my inbox on a Tuesday morning. One of those mass promotional blasts that usually gets immediately deleted along with the 17 LinkedIn connection requests from people I've never met. Join us for a groundbreaking presentation by Criterion Analytics' newest Director of Strategic Forecasting, Amber Lane, as she unveils revolutionary predictive modeling techniques that are reshaping the industry. Revolutionary. That was a funny way to spell blatantly stolen from her brother-in-law while pretending to be concerned about quality control. I clicked through to the conference website, which had clearly been designed by someone who thought more gradient effects automatically meant more credibility, and there it was. Amber's keynote presentation scheduled for the main ballroom at the Hyperion Hotel downtown. The session description made me laugh out loud at my desk, which caused Jenkins to peer over his cubicle wall with concern. Advanced volatility tracking, a new paradigm in emerging market analysis. A new paradigm. My paradigm. The one I developed over 6 years of research and about 4,000 hours of work that had aged me prematurely and given me a caffeine dependency that concerned medical professionals. The conference was in 3 weeks. Plenty of time for Amber to polish her presentation about her groundbreaking work. Also plenty of time for me to help her out with it, because I'm thoughtful like that. I wasn't even mad anymore, which was somehow worse than being mad. I'd transcended anger and reached a state of almost academic appreciation for the sheer audacity. She'd stolen my code, my formulas, my entire methodological framework, and even, I kid you not, my specific color scheme for data visualization. The woman had copied my work down to the exact shade of blue I used for confidence intervals. That takes a special kind of brazen that you almost have to respect, like being impressed by a pickpocket who steals your wallet and then tries to sell it back to you. I spent the rest of that day in what I can only describe as a fugue state of productive scheming. On the surface, I was running my normal analyses, attending my usual meetings, responding to emails with appropriate professional courtesy. But in my head, I was orchestrating something that would make Machiavelli slow clap. The beautiful thing about being underestimated your whole career is that nobody suspects you're capable of elaborate revenge plots. Quiet Daniel, who brings the same turkey sandwich for lunch every day? Nah, he's too passive for retaliation. He'll probably just write a stern email and call it justice. Wrong. That evening, I stayed late at the office, not unusual for me, which was convenient for what I was planning. I pulled up everything I had on the Wellington model, the original specifications, my development timeline with timestamps, every iteration and version saved with meticulous detail, because I have organizational issues that occasionally work in my favor. I created a beautiful side-by-side comparison document showing my original work next to what I knew Amber would present. It was like one of those expectation versus reality memes, except both sides looked identical because she'd literally copied my homework. The masterstroke, though, was finding that one typo I'd made in version 12 of the model, a transposed digit in a reference formula that didn't affect the calculations but was distinctive enough to be a fingerprint. I'd caught it and fixed it in version 13, but if Amber had stolen version 12 like I suspected, that typo would be in her presentation. It was the mathematical equivalent of leaving a trap for someone copying your work, except I'd done it accidentally and was now retroactively calling it genius. Marcus found me around 8 p.m., still at my desk surrounded by printouts and looking like a beautiful mind detective board without the actual string connecting everything. Dude, you okay? You've got that look. What look? The look people get right before they do something either really brilliant or really stupid, and it's honestly 50-50 which one. He leaned against my cubicle wall, arms crossed. This is about Amber, isn't it? I filled him in on the conference, the keynote, the whole situation. Marcus listened with increasing delight, his grin growing wider with each detail. So what are you going to do? I'm going to help her with her presentation, I said innocently. Help her? Yep. Make sure she has all the visual aids she needs for a comprehensive, thorough demonstration of her work. Marcus's eyes lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. You beautiful, petty genius. What do you need? What I needed, it turned out, was information about how conference presentations actually worked. I'd been to plenty of these things, but never paid attention to the technical side. I just showed up, gave my talk from my own laptop, and left. But for larger keynotes with hundreds of attendees, presentations usually got loaded onto the venue's system ahead of time for quality control and to avoid technical difficulties, which meant there was a window of opportunity between when Amber submitted her slides and when she actually presented. I spent the next week doing something I'm particularly good at: research. I found out the conference used a company called Event Tech Solutions for their presentation management. I learned that presenters typically submitted slides 5 to 7 days before the event. I discovered that the system allowed for last-minute technical updates if you had the right access credentials. And most importantly, I found out that the event coordinator was a woman named Patricia who answered her phone during business hours and was remarkably trusting when someone called claiming to be from the tech team doing quality assurance testing. Look, I'm not saying I'm proud of what I did next. I'm just saying that sometimes righteous indignation plus technical knowledge plus a complete lack of moral supervision equals creative problem solving. I called Event Tech Solutions exactly 1 week before the conference, using my most professional voice, the one I reserve for dealing with difficult clients and IRS auditors. Hi, this is Daniel Cross from the Wellington Financial Technical Team. We're coordinating with Criterion Analytics for their keynote presentation and wanted to run some compatibility tests on the slides before the event. Patricia, bless her trusting soul, bought it completely. Oh, wonderful. We always appreciate presenters who want to test ahead of time. Do you have the file access code? I didn't, but I had something better: the ability to sound incredibly confident while completely winging it. We're working with Ms. Lane's assistant on the coordination. Is there a way we could access the presentation portal to upload some test slides? We've had issues in the past with font rendering and want to make sure everything displays correctly. There was typing on the other end. I can send you a coordinator access link. This would let you view and edit any presentations submitted for the conference. Just for testing purposes, of course. Of course, I agreed, already grinning. Purely for technical verification. She sent me the link. I had access to Amber's presentation by that evening. Opening her slide deck was like watching a crime documentary where they reveal the murder weapon. There it was. My entire Wellington model, rebranded as the Lane methodology for advanced market prediction. She'd even created a fake development timeline that started right when she joined Criterion, as if she'd built this masterpiece in 6 months while I was apparently sitting around doing nothing for the past 6 years. And there, buried in slide 47, was my typo. The transposed digit in the reference formula. Proof positive that she'd stolen version 12. I sat there for a solid 5 minutes, just appreciating the evidence. Then I got to work. I created what I called supplementary materials, additional slides that would blend seamlessly into her presentation at key moments. A side-by-side comparison showing her slide next to my original with timestamps. A close-up of that beautiful typo with a helpful arrow pointing it out. A chart showing the development timeline of my original model overlaid with her claimed timeline. I even included some of my email correspondence with Wellington where they specifically praised my methodology, with dates conveniently visible. The trick was making it subtle enough that she wouldn't catch it during her pre-presentation review. assuming she did one, which was 50-50 given her attention to detail, but obvious enough that the audience would immediately understand what they were seeing. I embedded them as hidden slides that would only appear if someone clicked through normally, spaced throughout her presentation like landmines waiting to explode. I uploaded everything using Patricia's coordinator link, tested it 3 times to make sure it worked, and then closed my laptop with the satisfaction of someone who'd just completed a masterpiece. Jin called me the next day. I heard through the IT grapevine that you've been doing some creative technical work. I have no idea what you're talking about. Uh-huh. Well, hypothetically, if someone were to have done something clever involving conference presentation systems, I'd want to remind them that digital fingerprints exist and covering tracks is important. Hypothetically, I might have noticed some unusual access logs and cleaned them up. You know, routine maintenance. God bless IT departments and their flexible interpretation of security protocols. Was it petty? Absolutely. Was it deserved? Without question. Was I going to feel bad about it? Check back with me never. The National Financial Forecasting Conference was being held at the Hyperion Hotel, which was one of those massive downtown convention centers that tries way too hard to look futuristic and ends up looking like a spaceship designed by someone who'd never actually seen a spaceship. All glass and chrome, and those weird geometric light fixtures that probably cost more than my car, but looked like they came from a discount modern art sale. The lobby was packed with financial analysts in various states of business casual, all wearing lanyards, and that specific expression people get at professional conferences. A mixture of genuine interest, networking anxiety, and the dawning realization that the continental breakfast wasn't going to cut it for the whole day. I'd registered under my personal email rather than my work one, paid the frankly ridiculous $300 admission fee out of my own pocket, and showed up wearing jeans and a blazer like I was just another attendee interested in market forecasting trends. Nobody from Criterion would recognize me. I'd never dealt with them directly, and my LinkedIn profile picture was from 2019 when I had different glasses and significantly more optimism about humanity. I was functionally invisible, which was exactly how I wanted it. The conference schedule had Amber's keynote as the 11 a.m. session in the Grand Ballroom, which was apparently their biggest venue and could hold about 400 people. I grabbed what the hotel was generously calling coffee from the refreshment station. It tasted like someone had explained the concept of coffee to hot water and hoped for the best, and a handful of those sad mini muffins that conferences always serve, the ones that are about 60% wrapper and 40% disappointment. Then I strategically positioned myself near the back of the ballroom, far enough from the stage that I wouldn't be noticed, but close enough to see everything unfold in glorious high definition. The room filled up fast. Apparently, Criterion had done a solid job promoting their revolutionary new methodology, and financial analysts love nothing more than the promise of an edge in predictive modeling. It's like catnip for nerds. People filed in clutching their programs, finding seats, doing that awkward small talk thing where everyone pretends they remember meeting at last year's conference. I spotted a few familiar faces from the industry, analysts from competing firms, a couple of academics I recognized from published papers, and holy shit, was that Dr. Patel from Wellington sitting in the third row? This just got infinitely better. Dr. Patel was sitting there with a tablet and a notepad, looking exactly like someone who took professional presentations very seriously. Which made sense because the man had a Cambridge PhD and had probably sat through about 10,000 presentations in his career, most of which were probably terrible. He would absolutely recognize my work if he saw it. Hell, he praised it extensively during the Wellington contract. Having him in the audience was like having a surprise expert witness show up at your trial. Unplanned, but absolutely perfect. The lights dimmed at exactly 11. Because conferences run on the kind of rigid scheduling that makes German trains look spontaneous. A woman in a Criterion Analytics blazer took the stage to do the introduction, going through Amber's completely fabricated credentials with the enthusiasm of someone reading a phone book. Director of Strategic Forecasting, pioneering work in volatility prediction, revolutionary methodologies. I had to bite my muffin to keep from laughing, which was a mistake because it tasted like sweetened cardboard and regret. Then Amber made her entrance. She was dressed to kill in a silk designer outfit that probably cost what I made in a month, her hair in perfect waves that had definitely required professional intervention, looking like she was about to give a TED Talk that would change the world. The confidence radiating off her could have powered a small city. She walked to the podium like she owned not just the room, but the entire concept of financial forecasting, smiled at the audience with those perfectly whitened teeth, and clicked her remote to start the presentation. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice projecting with the practiced ease of someone who'd rehearsed this in front of a mirror approximately 1,000 times. "Today, I'm thrilled to share with you a breakthrough in predictive modeling that represents years of dedicated research and innovation." Years. Plural. My years, specifically, but who's counting? The first few slides went fine. Title card, introduction to criterion analytics, some generic statements about the importance of accurate market forecasting. Standard opening stuff that could have applied to literally any presentation ever given about finance. The audience was attentive, but not particularly excited yet. Just analysts being politely professional while checking their phones under the table. Then she got to the meat of it. "The Lane methodology," she announced, clicking to a slide that showed her volatility tracking framework. It was my model down to the last decimal point, my color scheme, my specific way of visualizing confidence intervals. I'd spent months perfecting that visualization because standard charts made complex volatility patterns look like abstract art, and she was presenting it like she'd birthed it fully formed from her own genius. "Traditional forecasting relies on linear assumptions," she continued, really getting into her rhythm now. "But markets aren't linear. They're chaotic, unpredictable, influenced by countless variables. What I've developed is a nonlinear approach that adapts in real time." Click. The slide changed to show exactly what she described, and right next to it, a second image appeared. My original slide from the Wellington presentation. Same content, same formatting. Timestamped 6 months before she even joined Criterion. The slides sat there side by side like twins separated at birth and reunited on Jerry Springer. The audience stirred. I heard someone in the second row say, "Wait, what?" Amber froze mid-gesture, her perfectly practiced hand movement suspended in air like someone had pressed pause on reality. She stared at the screen, and I watched in real time as her brain tried to process what was happening. You could practically see the Windows error message playing behind her eyes. "There must be a..." she started, clicking her remote to advance. The presentation moved forward, showing her next explanation of the risk parameters. Click. Another comparison slide appeared. Her version and my original, date stamped from the Wellington project, sitting side by side like evidence in a trial. This one even included a helpful arrow pointing to a section with the caption, "Note, identical methodology and parameters." The murmuring in the audience got louder. People were leaning forward now, actually paying attention instead of scrolling through emails. Dr. Patel had put down his tablet and was studying the screen with the intensity of someone who'd just recognized something very familiar. Amber was visibly panicking now, her polished composure cracking like ice on a warming lake. She clicked faster, trying to get past the comparison slides, but I'd embedded them throughout the entire presentation. Every major point she tried to make was immediately followed by proof that it wasn't her major point at all. It was like watching someone trying to run from their own shadow. "This is clearly a technical issue," she announced to the audience, her voice losing that smooth professional quality and gaining a slightly manic edge. "I apologize for these display errors. Let me just..." She clicked again. The slide that appeared showed the development timeline she'd fabricated, with her work supposedly beginning 6 months ago. Right next to it, my actual development timeline from the Wellington project, stretching back over 2 years. And as a special bonus, a screenshot of an email from Dr. Patel to me from 18 months ago with the subject line Impressive Volatility Framework. Dr. Patel stood up. In a room of 400 people, he stood up, and when a Cambridge PhD stands up during a presentation, everyone notices. "Excuse me," he said, his British accent cutting through the awkward silence like a scalpel. "That volatility framework, that's Daniel Cross's work. From the Wellington International Contract. I commissioned it personally." The room exploded into whispers. Heads turned. People were pulling out their phones, probably Googling my name and the Wellington contract. Amber looked like she'd been slapped with a frozen fish, shocked, confused, and increasingly aware that she was about to become the main character in the worst possible way. "There appears to be some confusion," she tried, but her voice was shaking now. The confidence had completely evaporated, replaced by the desperate energy of someone watching their career implode in real time. I couldn't help myself. I raised my hand, still holding my sad conference muffin like a trophy. Actually, I called out from the back, and about 300 heads swiveled in my direction. There's no confusion. This is my work. From the Wellington contract, like Dr. Patel said. I built that model over 6 years. Even kept the typo from version 12. It's on slide 47 if you want to check. Amber's face went from panic to recognition to pure horror in about 3 seconds. She finally spotted me in the back, and if looks could kill, I'd need to update my life insurance policy. But it was too late. The damage was done. The evidence was overwhelming. Her revolutionary methodology had been exposed as wholesale intellectual theft in front of 400 industry professionals and at least one very important client. This is outrageous. She tried one last time, but her voice cracked. I don't know who's responsible for sabotaging my presentation, but seems pretty accurate to me, I said, taking a bite of my terrible muffin with the casual energy of someone who'd just won the lottery. The room actually laughed, nervous laughter, but laughter nonetheless. Amber stood there for another 3 seconds, clicked her remote one more time like maybe the next slide would somehow save her, and then apparently decided that dignity was overrated. She grabbed her things and practically ran off the stage, her designer heels clicking out a rapid retreat that echoed through the now completely silent ballroom. A representative from Criterion Analytics, some senior VP who'd been sitting in the front row looking increasingly concerned, stood up and made his way to the stage with the grim determination of someone about to do damage control. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the confusion. Criterion Analytics takes intellectual property very seriously, and will be investigating this matter immediately. Translation: Amber was about to get fired so fast it would make the speed of light look like a casual stroll. Dr. Patel caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small nod that clearly said, "Well played." Marcus would be so proud when I told him about this. I'd become the stuff of office legend, the quiet analyst who'd taken down a corporate thief with nothing but documentation and perfectly timed slideshow sabotage. I finished my muffin, dumped my terrible coffee in the nearest trash can, and walked out of that ballroom feeling like I'd just completed the most satisfying project of my entire career. Revenge, it turns out, really is best served cold, and preferably in PowerPoint format with plenty of backup documentation. A week after the conference catastrophe, Criterion Analytics issued a carefully worded statement that basically translated to "Amber Lane has been fired, and we're pretending we had no idea she was a fraudulent disaster." The official line was, "Ms. Lane has left the company by mutual agreement to pursue other opportunities," which is corporate speak for she's unemployed and probably updating her resume while stress-eating ice cream and blaming Mercury retrograde for her problems. The financial industry loves gossip more than teenage girls at a sleepover, so the story spread faster than a data breach at a social media company. I became something of an underground legend, the quiet analyst who'd orchestrated the most spectacular conference takedown in recent memory. Dr. Patel sent me a bottle of extremely expensive scotch with a note that just said, "Brilliant." Marcus made me recount the story at least 7 times to different people in the office who wanted to hear it directly from the source. Paxton, sensing an opportunity to look like he'd been on my side all along, offered me a new title, Chief Methodology Officer, with a raise substantial enough to make my student loans actually seem manageable for the first time in a decade. I accepted with the kind of calm satisfaction that comes from knowing you've won so completely that gloating would be redundant. The best part? The absolute sweet silence from Amber. No texts, no calls, no passive-aggressive social media posts. Just beautiful, peaceful nothingness. When Mila tentatively asked if I'd forgiven her sister over dinner one night, I smiled and said, "Of course. Forgiveness is free, just like her career now." Sometimes revenge doesn't need shouting or drama. It just needs good documentation, perfect timing, and the patience to watch someone destroy themselves with their own stolen PowerPoint. And if you ever find yourself in a meeting where someone's publicly trying to destroy your work, don't panic. Just wait, smile, and ask one simple question. The rest will handle itself. My wife and her lawyer told me to sign a routine paper before dinner. IT was actually transferring our $72 million estate to her secret lover. What she didn't know was that I had already transferred it to someone she never saw coming. They say trust is the foundation of marriage. I say it's the first thing to vanish when your wife slides a routine document across the table right before dinner. Picture it. Candlelight, soft jazz, a plate of my favorite pasta, fettuccine Alfredo, the kind that could make a grown man confess to crimes just for a second helping, and my wife, Harper, smiling like a woman who'd already rehearsed her acceptance speech for Best Actress in a financial betrayal. "Just sign this for tax purposes," she said. The words rolled out of her mouth smooth and harmless, like a cat purring before it claws your face off. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who usually reads every line of paperwork. That's what accountants and caffeine are for. But something in her tone made me pause. Maybe it was the way she set the pen perfectly parallel to the signature line. Too prepared, too confident. Like she'd practiced this moment in the mirror, whispering, "Oscar goes to Harper Calloway for best performance in pretending to love her husband." I picked up the pen, twirled it between my fingers like I was considering my options, and then I saw it. A name that didn't belong. Ryan Calloway. It sat there on the page like an uninvited guest who brought Tupperware to a funeral. My brain did cartwheels, my stomach tried out for the Olympics, and suddenly, that Alfredo smelled like deceit sprinkled with Parmesan. "Who's Ryan Calloway?" I asked, voice steady, eyes glued to the paper. She blinked, once, twice, the way people do when they're buffering. "Oh, our accountant. He's helping with the transfer for the tax deduction. It's just technical." "Technical," I repeated, setting the pen down. "Right? Because nothing says romance like a legal document that sends $72 million to a man I've never met." She smiled wider, but her eyes flickered. Harper was beautiful, that soft kind of beauty that made strangers trust her instantly. But me? I'd seen the rehearsed version of that smile. The one she used when she told her mother she forgot to call. The one she flashed when a waiter mixed up our order, and she decided it was fine. Yeah, that smile was a performance, and I was done being the audience. The air changed. Candlelight suddenly felt like interrogation lighting. "Why are you hesitating?" she asked, laughing lightly, trying to sound casual. "You know I'd never ask you to sign anything risky." That's when I almost laughed out loud. Because a few months earlier, I'd noticed strange transfers in one of our holding companies. Tiny amounts, at first, then larger ones. Harper said it was charitable giving. I said, "Interesting, since the charity's address matches a liquor store in Nevada." She'd brushed it off, called it a clerical error, and kissed my cheek. But I wasn't born yesterday. Maybe the day before, but not yesterday. See, I built my wealth from the ground up. Real estate, logistics, a few strategic mergers. I've been called a lot of things: stubborn, methodical, paranoid. I prefer the term prepared. So 2 months before this little candlelight ambush, I'd quietly shifted everything: properties, patents, accounts, into my own labyrinth of legal protection. If you wanted to steal from me, you'd need GPS, divine intervention, and a map written by God himself. So, I smiled back at her and played dumb. "Sure, honey. Just want to make sure I understand what I'm signing. You said this is for tax purposes?" "Exactly," she said, leaning forward, twirling her fork like this was just another Tuesday. "Our accountant said we'd save a fortune." "Ryan Calloway, the accountant?" Her fork froze mid-spin. "Yes." "Funny," I said, taking a sip of my wine. Because when I Googled him last week after seeing his name on that Nevada transfer, I found no CPA credentials. But he does have an Instagram page. "With you. At the Amalfi Coast." The fork dropped. Clinked. Echoed like a gunshot in our perfect dining room. She tried to recover. Bless her soul, she really did. "That's not what it looks like. It looks like you're eating gelato with your accountant while he's wearing my sunglasses." She went quiet. You could have heard a mosquito cough. The silence stretched, thick enough to butter toast with. I could see the gears turning in her head, crisis control mode. She stood, crossed her arms, and said, "You're overreacting. You're always so suspicious, Henry. This is why we can't communicate." "Communication requires truth," I said, keeping my voice calm. "And a working definition of accountant that doesn't include guy you make out with in Italy." She huffed, tried to turn it back on me like she always did. "If you'd paid attention to me instead of your work." "Harper," I interrupted, You literally just tried to have me sign away $72 million. I think my attention's in the right place. Now, I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger gives people too much satisfaction. I was entertained. Watching her squirm was like watching a bad magician realize the rabbit's dead. She reached for the paper, but I got there first. Folded it neatly. Slid it into my pocket like a secret I wasn't done playing with. We're not done, she said, voice sharp now. You're making a mistake. Maybe, I said, standing. But at least I'll make it on my own terms. I walked toward my office. She followed, her heels clacking like an impatient metronome. Where are you going? Going to review this tax document with someone who actually passed math. You don't need to do that, she snapped. Victor already approved it. Ah, Victor, our family lawyer. A man whose loyalty was always conveniently for sale, depending on who brought better whiskey. That name told me everything I needed to know. If Harper got Victor involved, this was bigger than I thought. I'll double-check anyway, I said, opening my office door. She stood there, angry and cornered, but too proud to admit defeat. You're paranoid, she spat. You've always been paranoid. Maybe, I said, turning back just enough to meet her eyes. But paranoia is the reason I'm rich, and you're sweating. I closed the door before she could fire back. The sound of it shutting felt final. Inside, I sat at my desk and stared at the document again. Every clause, every signature line, every carefully hidden trap disguised as routine. It was genius, I'll give her that. If I'd signed it, Harper and her accountant, Ryan, would have walked away with everything. The houses, the stocks, the company, even the beach property in the Bahamas where I proposed to her. Irony at its finest. I picked up my phone, called someone I trusted, my assistant Lucy. Smart woman, loyal, always 2 steps ahead. Lucy, I said, pull the backup on all estate assets. Also call Miles. Miles Rodriguez? She asked. Yeah, our old forensic accountant. The one who doesn't cheat. Lucy whistled. That bad, huh? Let's just say my wife's auditioning for a role in Ocean's 11, Divorce Edition. When I hung up, I leaned back in my chair, took a deep breath, and laughed quietly. Not a bitter laugh. A calculated one. The kind that says, okay, you want to play games? Let's play. Harper thought she'd cornered me. She thought I'd blindly sign like the trusting husband she pretended to love. But here's what she didn't know. Every account she thought she controlled was already empty. Every property title already reassigned. The empire she tried to steal had quietly slipped out of her hands months ago. I opened my laptop, logged into a private server, and smiled at the sight of June's name. My little sister, officially listed as the beneficiary of a trust she didn't even know she owned yet. Harper used to mock her for being an artist, called her the broke Monet. Turns out, that broke Monet just became the silent guardian of a $72 million fortress. Back in the kitchen, I heard the faint clink of glass. Harper cleaning up, pretending everything was fine. Classic. She'd probably call Victor in a panic the second I went to bed. They'd whisper, plot, maybe even blame me for sabotaging our marriage. That's fine. Let them talk. I stood, walked back to the dining room doorway, and leaned on the frame. Dinner was great, by the way, I said. She turned, surprised. You're still eating? Nah, just digesting. She frowned. Digesting what? The moment you realized you just handed me proof of everything I needed. Her face drained. What are you talking about? You'll figure it out, I said, giving her a wink. You're smart when you're panicking. Then I left her there, standing in the warm glow of candlelight, staring at an empty chair and a half-eaten plate of pasta, wondering when exactly the script flipped. Spoiler alert, it flipped the second she slid that paper across the table. Because in that moment, the only signature that night wasn't mine. It was the death certificate of her plan. If betrayal were an Olympic sport, my wife Harper would have taken gold, cried fake tears during the national anthem, and thanked her loving husband for never suspecting a thing. She had the performance down to an art form, warm in public, cold as tax season in private. You know that look a cat gives you after knocking something off a shelf? That was her default setting. Lately she'd been working late, and I'd been pretending to believe her. We were both committed to our roles, though I was clearly underpaid for mine. Now, I'm not some naive sap who thinks his marriage can't hit rough patches. We've been married 6 years. Enough time for the honeymoon phase to die, resurrect itself through sheer caffeine, and then die again in a fire fueled by misplaced sarcasm. But Harper's late nights had a rhythm that smelled like trouble. Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. Always dressed better, makeup sharper, hair perfectly curled, and the perfume? Not the one I bought. The new one was called Midnight Promise, which, honestly, sounded more like a bad adult film than a fragrance. One Friday, I walked past our laundry room and froze. On top of the dryer sat a shirt, not mine, smelling like what could only be described as cheaper man with poor taste. It was one of those artificial masculine scents that scream, "I'm trying too hard." The cologne equivalent of a man who uses motivational quotes as personality. I held it up between two fingers like it was toxic waste. That's when she walked in. "Hey," she said, way too casual. "What are you doing?" "Trying to identify the species of this foreign fabric," I said. "You have any leads?" She blinked. "Oh, that's Victor's." He dropped it off. "Victor, our lawyer?" "Yeah. He said it was raining during one of his visits." "Raining inside our house." Her jaw clenched. She knew she'd stepped on her own lie, but Harper was the LeBron James of improv. I meant when he was bringing over documents. I washed it for him as a favor. "Ah," I said, nodding. "Because when I think lawyer, I think laundry service." She scowled and walked off. I tossed the shirt back on the dryer and whispered, "Nice try, Ryan." Because something told me the mystery man wasn't Victor and sure as hell wasn't a rain victim. That night, I sat in my office pretending to work. Harper was on the phone in the other room, whispering like she was plotting to overthrow a government. I leaned back in my chair, cracked open a beer, and let the performance unfold. "I can't talk right now," she hissed. "He's home." Pause. Soft laugh. "Yeah, I know, I'll handle it." She said it like I was a minor inconvenience, like the man paying the bills and the mortgage was just background noise in her dramatic monologue. I nearly clapped. Handle it. What was I, a parking ticket? See, the thing about Harper is she loved underestimating people. She once told her friends, right in front of me, that I was a kind man who doesn't understand business. She said it like I was a golden retriever who occasionally wore a tie. Which is funny, because I'm the guy who built the business that paid for her diamond earrings. And yes, I remembered that little detail every time I saw them sparkle like gilt under the kitchen light. But fine. She wanted to treat me like a fool? Cool. I'd be the fool with a plan. The next morning, I played along. I cooked breakfast, pancakes, bacon, fresh orange juice. Harper loved it when I did that. She called it my sweet husband routine, unaware that I was mostly buttering her up for reconnaissance. "You're up early," she said, walking in with that practiced smile. "Couldn't sleep," I said, flipping a pancake. "Dreamed I was signing away my fortune to a man named Ryan." Her hand froze midair. "That's specific." "Yeah, weird, right?" I said, turning the pancake like I hadn't just thrown a grenade. "Dreams are funny that way." She laughed nervously, brushing it off, and poured herself coffee. "You need to stop overthinking things." "Trust me," I said. "I'm done thinking. Just acting now." The way she looked at me, confusion trying to disguise itself as confidence, was priceless. She was slipping. The cracks were showing, and I wasn't even halfway done. Later that day, I called Miles Rodriguez, the forensic accountant I'd used years back when one of my business partners tried to pull a fast one. Miles was like Sherlock Holmes, but for bank statements. I told him I needed a quiet look into every account Harper had touched in the past year. No emails, no records, just a phone call when he had answers. He laughed. "You finally taking my advice and checking your own wife's transactions." "Better late than broke," I said. For the next few days, I played the part of the oblivious husband. Harper, sensing nothing, kept her work trips going. She'd leave in tailored dresses, heels clicking like war drums, with a kiss that barely touched my cheek. Each time, I'd smile and wave like an idiot, then track her car from the GPS app she'd forgotten I had access to. Old habits die hard, and so do bad liars. She wasn't going to the firm downtown. Nope. She was driving to a sleek apartment complex 20 minutes away. Ryan's place, no doubt. I didn't even need proof. My gut already handed me the verdict. But still, I waited. Patience is revenge's favorite spice. One afternoon, she called me from that apartment, pretending she was at work. "Hey, baby," she said in that sweet tone she reserved for manipulation. "I'll be home late. Big client meeting tonight." "Sounds serious," I said, sipping coffee. Make sure your accountant friend helps balance the books. Silence. Just breathing. What? She finally asked. Nothing. You just sound busy. I am, she snapped. Of course. Don't let me interrupt your math session. She hung up. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my mug. I could picture her face, that mix of panic and denial, trying to figure out if I'd found something. That night, she came home late again, reeking of perfume and cheap lies. I was sitting in the living room, pretending to watch ESPN, but I was really watching her reflection in the TV. She saw me and paused. You're still up? She asked. Yeah, just studying game footage. Of what? Deception. She blinked. What? Basketball. I said, smirking. Fake passes. Gotta stay sharp. She rolled her eyes and walked off. She was so sure of her power that she didn't even realize she'd been dethroned hours ago. By Sunday, Miles called back. You're not gonna like this, he said. Buddy, if it's about my hairline, you're late. He laughed dryly. No, man. This is worse. There's been a pattern of withdrawals, accounts under your company's name, redirected to something called M. Ellis Holdings. Sounds fancy, right? Never heard of it. That's because it doesn't exist. It's a shell company. And guess who's linked to it? Harper. He hesitated. Not directly. The registered contact is a woman named Mara Ellis. Mara Ellis? I repeated. Sounds like a bad soap opera character. Yeah, except Mara doesn't exist. I cross-referenced the SSN. Fake. The address leads to a storage unit registered to, wait for it, Ryan Calloway. I laughed. Loud, like a man who'd finally found the punchline to his own misery. You're telling me my wife and her side piece built a fake company to steal from me? Wow. Love and larceny. A true American romance. Miles sighed. You want me to freeze the accounts? Not yet, I said, leaning back in my chair. Let them cook a little longer. I want to see how far they'll go. For the next week, I became an actor in my own movie. Smiles at breakfast. Hugs before work. Little notes left on the counter. Love you with a heart. It killed her. I could see the guilt start to crawl up her throat, fighting her fake composure. I'd walk into a room, and she'd flinch, like maybe I'd caught her red-handed. And maybe I had. One evening, she decided to test the waters. We should go away this weekend, she said, sipping wine. Just us. Oh, what? To reconnect. Reconnect. I said, you sure you're not just looking for better Wi-Fi to message Ryan? She froze. The glass in her hand trembled slightly. What did you say? I said, great idea. We'll reconnect. I smiled wide. Maybe over dinner. I'll make something special. The way she relaxed told me she had no idea that I was already preparing my own recipe, not for food, but for checkmate. That night, as she fell asleep beside me, pretending to dream innocent dreams, I whispered, you really should have picked a man who reads the fine print. Because I wasn't just planning a confrontation. I was planning a finale. She thought she'd built the perfect stage, but she forgot who built the house. The next morning started like any other disaster waiting to happen. Burnt toast, bad coffee, and my wife pretending not to be the co-founder of How to Steal a Marriage in 10 Easy Steps. I was halfway through scrolling the news when I heard tires crunch on the driveway. Through the window, a sleek black Mercedes purred to a stop, and out stepped Victor Haynes, our family lawyer, confidant, and, apparently, part-time actor in Harper's personal crime drama. He used to swagger into my house like a man whose retainer fee paid for his sense of humor. Today he moved like he was headed to his own execution. I opened the door before he could knock. Morning, Victor, I said, smiling like a man who still trusted him. You bring donuts or bad news? He gave that weak lawyer laugh, the one that sounds like it's checking for legal loopholes mid-giggle. Just some routine paperwork, Henry. Harper mentioned we needed your signature for compliance. Compliance, I repeated, leaning on the doorframe. That word's getting a lot of airtime lately. You sure you don't mean complicity? He chuckled again, but his eyes darted everywhere except mine. That's when I knew. This man had been drafted to team. That woke him up. You serious? Serious enough to pay you triple your rate and name a bourbon after you when this is over. He snorted. All right, what's the target? My wife and our lawyer, Victor, track everything they've touched in the last 12 months. Business accounts, personal accounts, shell companies, secret wallets, coffee loyalty cards. If it has a balance, I want to know where it went. Miles whistled. Sounds like fun. Oh, it will be, I said. Just don't contact me by email or text. Call from a burner, like we're in an HBO show. He laughed. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Not yet, but I will. I hung up and sat back, watching the sunlight hit the edge of my desk. Harper walked by the office, pretending she wasn't curious. She peeked in with that casual tone she used when she was fishing for intel. Who were you talking to? Just Miles, I said, smiling. You remember him, the accountant who caught the yacht thief. She froze for half a second, just long enough to confirm she knew that name meant trouble. Oh, right, she said. That guy? What? Routine audit, I said. Just making sure our books are clean. Her face twitched. You don't trust Victor? I don't trust anyone who can't look me in the eye while they bill me $600 an hour. She huffed, pretending to be offended. You're paranoid. Paranoia keeps billionaires from becoming ex-billionaires, I said. Now, go enjoy your day. Try not to accidentally wire the mortgage to the wrong boyfriend. She left without another word. 2 days later, my phone buzzed at 2:13 a.m. Miles never called during daylight. Said drama looked better under moonlight. You're not going to like this, he said. I laughed into the dark. You keep saying that, and I keep enjoying it. Okay, he said. Remember those small transfers from last year? I traced them to a woman named Mara Ellis. Mara who? Exactly. She doesn't exist. Fake name, fake address. But the account under her name? It's active, and someone's been sending money there every 2 weeks. About 40 grand a pop. From where? Your joint business account. And guess whose login authorized it? I didn't need to guess. Harper. Bingo. Oh, and here's the plot twist. The registered beneficiary under that fake name? Ryan Calloway. For a second, I didn't say anything. I just lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spin like it was clapping for my stupidity. She's funneling money to him. Not just funneling, he said. They built a shell network, 3 fake entities, 2 holding accounts, and 1 offshore route through the Caymans. It's amateur hour, but it's working. Unbelievable, I muttered. She's laundering my money through a fake woman. That's commitment. I can't even get her to commit to dinner plans. Miles laughed. You want me to shut it down? Not yet, I said. Let's make it interesting. The next morning, I played the calm husband routine again. Pancakes, coffee, news headlines, all normal. Harper came downstairs looking radiant and deeply annoying, humming like a woman who thought she was 1 wire transfer away from paradise. You're in a good mood, she said. Of course, I said. I love mornings when I'm not getting robbed. She tilted her head. Still on that. Still married, aren't I? She rolled her eyes and poured coffee. You really should let Victor explain the document. Oh, I did, I said. But he started sweating so much. I thought he was auditioning for a sauna commercial. That made her pause mid-sip. What did you say to him? Just asked who Ryan Calloway was. He nearly fainted. You might want to send flowers. The color drained from her face before she caught herself. You're being dramatic. Probably, I said. But if I were you, I'd start rehearsing for Act 3. She slammed her cup down. You can't keep accusing me of things. Sure I can, I said, standing. It's America. She stormed off, muttering something about therapy. I smiled, because I knew exactly where this was headed. Denial, panic, blame, collapse. The 4 stages of marital fraud. Later that day, Miles called again. So, you were right about Victor. He's been moving small sums through his trust account too. I pulled the digital signatures. He's personally approved every transfer Harper made. Well, I said, it's nice to see teamwork still exists in this country. Miles snorted. You want me to report him to the bar? Not yet, I said. Let's keep our enemies employed until they dig their own graves. Classic Henry, he said. Strategic sadism. Trademark pending, I replied. That night, I had dinner alone. Harper was working late again, which was probably code for meeting Ryan to plot their next money laundering episode. I poured myself wine, sat in the quiet, and thought about the irony. The woman who used to call me boring was out there starring in a true crime documentary, and she didn't even know the cameras were rolling. Around 10, she walked in, pretending to be exhausted. Long day, she said, kicking off her heels. Yeah, I said. Paperwork will do that to you. She froze. What paperwork? Oh, I don't know, I said, swirling my wine. Bank transfers. Shell companies. Fraudulent beneficiaries. Pick your poison. Her lips parted, eyes wide. You're insane. Maybe, I said. But I'm the kind of insane that checks bank statements. She scoffed. You're unbelievable. I try, I said. By the way, how's Mara Ellis? She blinked. Who? I smirked. That's your problem, Harper. You're a good liar, but you forget your own lies. She didn't answer, just turned and walked upstairs. I could hear her pacing above me, probably calling Victor or Ryan or both. I let her stew, because nothing ruins a scam faster than paranoia, and I was spoon-feeding it to her like dessert. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. Miles sent a voice message this time, low and urgent. Henry, I found something else. There's a joint insurance policy Harper filed, payable upon your death. Beneficiaries, Harper Calloway and Ryan Calloway. I sat there in silence for a moment, then laughed so hard I scared my dog. Oh, she's not just greedy. She's ambitious. Want me to cancel it? No, I said, grinning. Let her think the jackpot's still in play. Just make sure if anyone files a claim, they end up on a no-fly list. Miles chuckled. Got it. You know, man, this is the wildest marriage I've ever audited. Yeah, I said. The vows should have said for richer or for felony. Over the next week, I let Harper think she was winning. She pranced around the house humming, texting on her phone like she was flirting with destiny. I acted busy with work, smiled at her jokes, even bought her flowers, not as a romantic gesture, but as props for the final act. One night, she asked, "You've been sweet lately. What's changed?" Perspective, I said. I realized I was too hard on you. Her eyes softened. Really? Yeah, I said. I should have given you more space to make your own mistakes. She laughed, thinking I'd surrendered. Oh, sweetheart. I hadn't surrendered. I'd gone nuclear. Because what she didn't know was that every fake company, every hidden transfer, every forged signature was already documented, signed, sealed, and backed up across 3 servers. Miles had built me a digital dossier so airtight, it could have survived an asteroid. Harper thought she was the architect of deceit. She didn't realize I'd already built the firewall. By Friday, Miles sent me one final update. All set, he said. If she moves another $1, it triggers an automatic report to federal fraud detection. Perfect, I said. Now we just wait for her to try. That night, Harper came home glowing, like someone who just won the lottery. She poured champagne, set the table, and said, "We should celebrate. You've been so understanding lately." Oh yeah, I said. What are we celebrating? New beginnings, she said, clinking her glass against mine. I smiled. You're right. New beginnings sound great. She took a long sip, satisfied, while I mentally counted down the hours until her new beginning included an IRS investigation, a revoked lawyer's license, and a very awkward breakup with her fake accountant boyfriend. Because when you mess with my money, I don't just get even. I get creative. And as I watched her laugh across the table, blissfully unaware that her whole house of cards was about to collapse, I thought, damn, she really could have been an actress. Too bad she picked the wrong movie. There's a very particular calm that comes after betrayal, the kind where you stop shouting, stop questioning, and start planning. It's the sound of revenge stretching before its morning jog. By the time Harper started acting like everything was fine again, I was already 6 moves ahead, spreadsheet open, whiskey poured, and a playlist called Strategic Payback humming through my headphones. I wasn't angry anymore. I was motivated. See, anger is loud and sloppy. Strategy? That's jazz, cool, unpredictable, devastating in the right hands. The goal was simple. Protect everything she wanted to steal, then make her realize it was never hers to touch. With Miles's help, I began moving every tangible and intangible asset into one neat little box the law calls an irrevocable trust. Emphasis on irrevocable, meaning once it's locked, not even God can sign it back. And because irony is my love language, I registered it under one name, my little sister, June. Now, June is the kind of person Harper always underestimated. She's 30, paints murals for a living, dresses like a thrift store exploded in color, and once tried to pay for brunch with a poem. To Harper, she was harmless. To me, she was perfect. The one person no one would suspect of owning a multi-million-dollar estate. When I called her, she was half asleep and covered in paint. "Hey, big brother," she mumbled. "You never call unless someone's died or you need bail money." "Funny," I said. "This time it's better. You're about to become the legal owner of a $72 million empire." Silence. Then, "Okay, what did you do?" "Nothing illegal," I said. "I just need to put everything I own in your name, temporarily." "Temporarily?" "Henry, Are you running from the FBI again? Again? I said. That was one misunderstanding and a fireworks permit. Focus. She laughed. You're serious. Dead serious. I'm making you the trustee of the Whitmore Trust. It's airtight. No one, not even me, can touch it without you. Harper can't access a dime. Victor can't find a loophole, and Ryan Calloway can go buy himself a cheaper cologne. June paused. You're trusting me with everything? Yep. Wow, she said. I mean, I once lost my debit card in a jar of pickles, but sure. I can handle 72 million. That's the spirit, I said. Just don't post about it on Instagram. Over the next week, we executed the plan like clockwork. Miles drew up the paperwork. I re-registered company shares, patents, real estate, and offshore accounts. The transfer trail was a maze even a hacker would cry over. Every asset moved quietly, one at a time, disguised under routine internal transfers. Harper thought she was married to a businessman. She forgot she was married to the architect of the system itself. The best part? I didn't even have to lie. I told her I was restructuring for tax reasons. She nodded enthusiastically. Good idea, she said. That'll make things easier when we, expand. Expand? I asked. She smiled that fake investor smile. When we build the next branch of Whitmore Holdings, of course. Right? I said, trying not to laugh. Expansion. Brilliant. By expand, she meant transfer my fortune to her lover with a nice ribbon. Cute. Every night, while she scrolled through Pinterest pretending to care about home decor, I worked on what I called the fortress. Miles handled the filings. June acted as trustee, and I wrote a clause that would have made Shakespeare proud. If anyone attempted to challenge ownership, all assets would automatically donate to charity. In other words, if Harper tried to sue, she'd be competing with the Red Cross. It took 9 days to finalize. 9 glorious days of watching my wife hum around the house, blissfully unaware that her jackpot had already been relocated. The morning the trust became legally active, Miles called me with that "we did it" voice. Congratulations, you just disappeared $72 million. Music to my ears, I said. Now let's watch them panic. That evening, Harper decided to cook, a rare event, since she believed kitchens were for aesthetics, not function. She wore an apron that said "Kiss the Cook" like she hadn't just tried to financially assassinate me last week. You're in a good mood, she said. Just business going well, I replied, chopping vegetables like I wasn't also metaphorically dicing her entire scheme. She slid next to me, kissed my cheek. I love when you're focused on work. Me too, I said. It keeps my mind sharp. You never know who might be plotting against you. She laughed nervously. You and your jokes. Yeah, I said. Jokes. After dinner, she opened a bottle of wine, poured herself a generous glass, and casually mentioned, Victor said the estate restructuring papers need your signature soon. Did he? I said, sipping water. Strange, he hasn't called me. Oh, he's just waiting for your confirmation. It's all routine. That word again. Routine. I swear if one more person said it, I'd have it trademarked for sarcasm. Sure, I said. We'll handle it. She smiled, thinking she'd reel me back in. Meanwhile, my lawyer, my real lawyer, Sharon Wells, was sitting in her office finalizing a counter notice declaring all of Harper's future claims null and void. Sharon's a pit bull in a power suit, the kind of woman who bills by the minute and makes judges stutter. I told her everything. Let me guess, she'd said. Your wife thinks she's smarter than you. Precisely. Then let her keep thinking that, Sharon replied. Dumb confidence is the best camouflage. I loved her instantly. By day 10, the Whitmore Trust was officially sealed and registered. Legally, I didn't own a penny anymore. June did, which meant Harper couldn't touch anything even if she somehow stole my signature, fingerprints, and soul. It was bulletproof. That night, Harper sauntered into my study, holding another folder. Victor wants this signed tonight, she said sweetly. I took it, flipped through the pages. Same structure, same fake accounting language, same trap. She leaned against the desk, pretending not to care. It's just compliance, babe. I can drop it off in the morning. You really care about our finances, I said. She grinned. Someone has to. True, I said. And someone has to keep them safe. She laughed, oblivious. That's you. My protector. I nodded slowly. Always. After she left, I called June. How's my favorite accidental billionaire? She giggled. Still waiting for someone to ask if I want paper or plastic for my yacht. Keep your head down, I said. We're almost at the finale. You sound like a movie villain, she teased. Not villain, I said. Protagonist in a redemption arc. Over the next few days, Harper's behavior got weirder. She was nervous, jumpy, always checking her phone. She'd leave the room to whisper into it, thinking I couldn't hear. But she wasn't talking to Ryan anymore. She was talking to Victor. Miles tracked multiple encrypted messages between them. The plan was simple. They wanted me to sign the transfer before the quarterly audit, move everything into Ryan's name, then vanish. Too bad the assets were already under my sister's name. The transfer she'd present to me next week would be nothing but a theatrical gesture, an empty heist in an empty vault. I was actually excited. Watching a con artist realize the loot is gone. That's cinema. So I played along, smiled more, brought her coffee in the mornings, kissed her on the way out. She started thinking the storm had passed. That's the thing about con artists. They mistake calm for forgiveness. One afternoon, Miles called again, voice practically singing. You'll love this. Harper just sent Victor an email titled, Final Transfer Execution. She attached your forged signature. Beautiful, I said. Forward it to Sharon. Time to start the fireworks. That night, I found Harper in the kitchen again, pretending to cook. She looked radiant, calm before the implosion. You okay? I asked. Perfect, she said. Everything's falling into place. Yeah, I said softly. It really is. She gave me a kiss, lingered a second too long, then said, Tomorrow, I'll need you to come by Victor's office for one last thing. Then we can finally relax. Of course, I said. Tomorrow sounds perfect. The next morning, I wore my best suit, navy blue, the one I save for board meetings and symbolic victories. Harper was glowing. Victor greeted us at his office with that nervous smile lawyers get right before they commit career suicide. He handed me another folder. Routine transfer for compliance, he said. I could have laughed right there. Of course it is, I said, flipping it open like I hadn't already transferred everything to June a week ago. Wouldn't want to delay our expansion. Harper beamed. Victor tried not to hyperventilate. And me? I just signed the air above the page with my finger and said, You know what? I'll do this publicly. For transparency. Her eyes widened. Publicly? Absolutely, I said. It's time everyone sees how transparent you are. She had no idea that I meant it literally. That night, I invited them all to dinner. Harper, Victor, and yes, Ryan Calloway himself. The perfect little reunion. Miles called it the signing ceremony. Sharon called it legal theater. I called it Thursday. But that, my friend, is a story for the next chapter. Because by the time the champagne cork popped at that dinner table, the only thing Harper would be signing was the obituary of her own plan. There are moments in life when you know you're walking straight into a setup, but you still go, because the part of you that's petty, vindictive, and just a little theatrical wants front row seats to the disaster. That was me the night Harper invited me to what she called a romantic dinner to reconnect. Translation, another performance of how to scam your husband without getting caught. She set the table like it was Valentine's Day in hell. Candles, imported wine, soft jazz playing, the whole domestic charade. When I walked in, she was wearing the red dress, the one that used to make me forget my own name before I realized it was probably purchased with my credit card. You look beautiful, I said, because flattery makes liars comfortable. Thanks, she purred. I thought we could start over tonight. I smiled, sat down, and noticed the manila folder already waiting beside my plate. My favorite side dish, paperwork. You shouldn't have, I said, tapping it lightly. What's this? Dessert. Just a few forms Victor brought over, she said sweetly. Simple stuff. Transfer confirmations, compliance signatures, all that boring financial talk you hate. I leaned back. You're right, I do hate boring things. Good thing this dinner looks exciting. Victor arrived 5 minutes later, sweating like a man who'd just been told taxes were due in blood. He gave me the world's most awkward handshake, muttering something about traffic. No problem, I said. I wouldn't want you to miss the main course. The man sat down, adjusted his tie, and immediately pulled out another copy of the same folder. Harper gave me that tight smile, the kind liars use when they think the game is already won. You'll just need to sign a few pages, she said, sliding the papers toward me. Victor will witness, and we can all relax afterward. Now, I could have blown the whole thing right there, pulled out the trust documents, and ended the show. But where's the fun in that? No, this deserved drama, slow burn humiliation, the kind that ages well in memory. So I played dumb. Sure, I said, flipping the pages casually, my fork spinning spaghetti like I was multitasking through betrayal. Let's see what we've got. Halfway down the first page, I read it aloud, just loud enough to make her flinch. Transfer of estate, primary beneficiary, Ryan Calloway. The air stopped. Victor blinked. Harper froze, then tried to recover with a laugh, so fake it should have come with a price tag. Babe, she said softly, you don't have to read it out loud. Oh, I do, I said, smiling. I want to make sure the betrayal is properly pronounced. Victor started adjusting his tie again, like circulation was optional. Henry, this is just a draft. There's no need to. To what? I interrupted. To check what I'm signing before I give away $72 million to my wife's boyfriend. He swallowed. That's not what's happening. Sure, I said. And I suppose Ryan Calloway is just the Easter Bunny with a business degree. Harper's tone shifted fast. You're embarrassing yourself. Sweetheart, I said, I'm way past embarrassment. You made sure of that the day you sent my money to a ghost named Mara Ellis. Her eyes widened. You've been spying on me? No, I said. I've been doing what you should have done, auditing. She stood, defensive. You're twisting everything. Am I? I said. Because I've got transaction logs, wire trails, IP addresses, and screenshots of Victor here approving each transfer. And believe me, none of them scream routine compliance. Victor opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. Don't. I've seen enough courtroom dramas to know you're about to say something like, it's not what it looks like. Save it. What it looks like is you two conspired to strip me of every asset I own. And what it is happens to be exactly that. The silence was beautiful. I could practically hear the jazz falter mid-saxophone solo. Harper's composure cracked. Henry, she said, forcing calm. You're overreacting. This is all a misunderstanding. I was trying to help simplify our accounts before tax season. You know how complicated your business is. Oh, I know, I said, cutting her off. And you know what's even more complicated? Explaining to the FBI why your simplification process funneled 7 figures into an offshore account under your lover's name. Victor's hand trembled. Henry, please. Please what? I asked. Please don't call your bar association. Please don't leak your little side hustle to the press. Or please pass the salt while I choke down this masterpiece of deceit. I took a slow bite of pasta just to watch them squirm. Tasted like victory and marinara. Harper slammed her hand on the table. You think you're so righteous. You've been distant for years, Henry. I was lonely. Lonely. I laughed. You weren't lonely, Harper. You were greedy. You wanted more than money. You wanted control. You wanted the company, the estate, the lifestyle, and a man stupid enough to give it to you. Unfortunately, you picked me. Her voice cracked. You're not the victim here. Sure, I said. Let's ask Victor what he thinks. The man looked like he wanted to crawl inside his briefcase and zip it shut. This isn't personal, he whispered. Oh, it's personal, I said, leaning forward. You walked into my home, took my whiskey, ate my food, and helped my wife plan my financial funeral. That's about as personal as it gets. He stammered. We can fix this. Can you fix the part where you're both getting audited next week? His eyes widened. What? I smiled. Yeah, see. I may have had Miles set up an automatic compliance report for every transaction tied to your names. Turns out, federal auditors love red flags. You're about to become their favorite case study. Harper's voice went sharp. You can't do that. I already did. She backed up, breathing hard, realizing this wasn't a fight she could win with charm. What do you want from me? Nothing, I said. That's the beauty of it. I already have everything. She frowned, confused. You think you can keep all this? You can't. You'll have to divide assets. I'll take half. I laughed. Oh, Harper, you'd have to own something to take half of it. She froze. What do you mean? I stood, walked to the cabinet, and pulled out a leather folder. The trust documents. I mean that everything you were trying to steal, houses, shares, patents, accounts, has been moved into a private trust. Victor looked like he'd seen a ghost. That's impossible. Legally? No. Morally? Definitely. Harper grabbed the papers, flipping through them like a woman searching for oxygen. You put everything in someone else's name? Yep. My sister June. Remember her? The one you said would never understand money? Turns out, she doesn't have to. She just has to exist. And guess what? The trust is irrevocable. Which means not even I can touch it. Harper's voice broke. You gave away everything? I secured everything. I corrected. I may not own it, but I control it. You? You own regret. She sank into her chair, hands shaking. Victor muttered something about legal recourse, but even he knew this was game over. I poured myself another glass of wine, savoring it like a curtain call. You know, I said, I really did love you once. I built this empire with you in mind, and you almost made me regret it. But now, I'm grateful. You taught me a valuable lesson about trust and accountants with abs. Her eyes filled with tears. You're cruel. No, I said. You're cruel. I'm just better at it. Victor finally stood up, mumbling something about needing air. I gestured toward the door. Careful on your way out. There's a special place in hell for disbarred lawyers who marry their clients' wives. He froze. What are you talking about? Oh, come on, I said. You really think Harper's sticking with Ryan after this? Please. She collects men like handbags. You're probably next in line once Ryan realizes she's broke. Harper glared at me, tears cutting through her foundation. You'll regret this. Doubtful, I said. But thanks for the offer. I raised my glass. To routine dinners and ruined plans. And then, as if fate wanted to make it cinematic, the jazz track switched to It Had to Be You. Perfect. I drained my glass while Harper stormed upstairs, heels clicking like a drum roll for defeat. Victor followed her out, muttering apologies that sounded more like prayers. When the door finally shut, I sat alone in the quiet glow of candlelight. The plates were cold, the wine half empty, the air thick with the ghost of everything she'd just lost. And I laughed, slow, deep, uncontrollable laughter that filled the entire house. Because in the end, there was no yelling, no violence, no grand explosion. Just silence. And me, surrounded by everything they tried to steal, still standing. They say revenge is best served cold. Personally, I think it's best served with pasta and a side of poetic justice. You ever watch people walk into their own downfall wearing smiles? It's poetic. Like watching a reality show where everyone thinks they're the main character, except the audience already knows the twist. That's exactly how I felt the night of what Harper proudly called our signing ceremony. The phrase alone sounded like a cult event, but I nodded, said I'd love to make things official, and secretly hired a photographer to immortalize every second of the train wreck. Because if I'm going to destroy my enemies, I at least want good lighting. The dinner was set at La Serrata, a five-star restaurant known for making rich people feel even richer. Harper booked the private wine cellar room, the kind lined with overpriced Merlot bottles and candles that smell like tax deductions. She wanted an audience, she said, just to keep things transparent. I agreed instantly. Transparency was about to take on a whole new meaning. When I arrived, she was already there, shimmering in diamonds that could probably fund a small country. She looked nervous, but tried to hide it behind that Hollywood-ready smile. Victor sat beside her, face pale, tie askew, and sweating like a man who just Googled prison sentencing guidelines. Across from them sat Ryan Calloway, the infamous accountant-turned-amateur con man, smiling with all the grace of a man who believes deodorant is optional. He stood to shake my hand like we were equals. Henry, finally. It's an honor to meet you. Oh, I bet it is, I said, shaking his hand with a grip just tight enough to make him question his life choices. You've certainly worked hard to earn it. Harper jumped in. Henry, let's not start the night like this. Tonight's about closure and cooperation. Closure, I repeated, sitting down. Can't wait. The waiter arrived, blissfully unaware he was serving a table full of future defendants. Harper ordered wine, Chateau something pretentious, and Ryan ordered steak, rare, because of course he did. Victor asked for water. Smart man, hydration's important when your career's about to spontaneously combust. Before we eat, Harper said, her voice sugar-coated but trembling underneath. I just wanted to say I'm glad we're doing this the right way. No lawyers, no fighting, just trust and maturity. I smiled. Oh, I'm all for maturity. Especially when it's notarized. Victor gave me a look that said, please don't do this here. Too late, buddy. The show had started. Harper opened the folder she'd been guarding like the crown jewels and slid it toward me. Here it is, she said softly. The final agreement. Once you sign, everything's settled. Everything, Ryan echoed. raising his glass. To new beginnings. New beginnings, Harper repeated, clinking glasses with him. She glanced at me, expecting participation. I clinked too, but mine was more of a countdown. I set my glass down and opened the folder. Inside was the same fraudulent masterpiece. Transfer of estate, beneficiary Ryan Calloway, notarized by none other than our pal Victor. What they didn't know was that I'd already had a forensic expert watermark the pages. Every signature, every date, every notary stamp would lead straight back to them. I leaned back. So, before I sign, small correction. Harper's smile faltered. Correction? Yeah, I said casually. Tiny thing, probably not worth mentioning. This estate? It no longer belongs to me. Silence. Pure, golden silence. Victor blinked twice. Harper laughed nervously. What do you mean it doesn't belong to you? I said, sipping wine. Legally, I have no assets. Everything you see, the company, the real estate, the stocks, has been transferred into a private trust, managed by someone I trust far more than either of you. Victor's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Ryan frowned. You can't just move that kind of money overnight. Oh, I didn't, I said. It's been moved for weeks. You just didn't notice because you were too busy playing Ocean's 11, the marriage edition. Harper's voice cracked. That's impossible. The filings, the signatures. All valid, I said. Just not yours. See, the trust is under my sister June's name. You remember June, right? The artsy one with no financial sense. Turns out she's now the most financially powerful bohemian in the city. Victor finally found words. Henry, this is highly irregular. Oh, I know, I said. Irregular's my thing. Harper's jaw tightened. You can't do that. It's marital property. Correction again, I said, smiling wider. It was marital property. Now it's trust property, which, legally, is separate. Irrevocable, too. You can challenge it, but the moment you do, every cent goes to charity. I call that the greed deterrent clause. Ryan's face went red. You think you're clever, huh? Not really, I said. Just literate. You should try it sometime. Victor exhaled like a man witnessing his retirement dissolve. You don't understand what you've done. This could be. Oh, I understand perfectly, I cut in. I've ensured that when Harper here inevitably tries to take what's mine, she'll be left with nothing but this dinner bill and a boyfriend who can't legally balance his own checkbook. The waiter arrived right on cue, setting plates down like he was serving the gods. I gave him a smile. Thanks, my man. You might want to stick around. You're about to see a free masterclass in self-destruction. He blinked, nodded, and wisely retreated. Harper's hands trembled as she flipped through the folder again, realizing it meant nothing now. The blood drained from her face. You set me up. No, I said, cutting my steak. You set yourself up. I just provided better lighting. Ryan leaned forward, trying to sound tough. You can't talk to her like that. Relax, discount cologne, I said. You're next. He slammed his hand on the table. I'll sue you. I raised an eyebrow. For what? Emotional distress from losing stolen property? Please. I've met toddlers with stronger cases. Victor rubbed his temples. Everyone needs to calm down. There's no need for threats. I agree, I said. That's why I already filed everything quietly. See, when I found out about your little side hustle, I had Miles Rodriguez trace every transfer. He also sent copies to the authorities, just in case someone tried to delete the evidence. Victor's complexion went the color of skim milk. Harper looked like she might throw up her diamonds. Ryan muttered something that sounded like unbelievable. Unbelievable. I echoed. Buddy, you literally created a fake woman named Mara Ellis to hide money. Unbelievable is thinking you'd get away with it. The silence stretched so long I could have ordered dessert. Finally, Harper whispered, You planned this. From the start. I smiled. No, you planned it. I just decided to direct it. Victor stood up abruptly. I need some air. Take all you want, I said, while you can still afford oxygen. He stumbled out, leaving Harper and Ryan staring at me like deer realizing headlights aren't a compliment. Harper's voice broke. Henry, please. We can fix this. We can. Fix this. I repeated, laughing softly. You think this is a flat tire? You tried to bury me, Harper. You wanted the empire without the man. Now you have neither. She reached for my hand. Desperation finally replacing arrogance. We used to be good together. Yeah, I said. Before you turned marriage into a business merger and hired a clown as your CFO. Ryan stood up, muttering curses. I ignored him, taking one last sip of wine before sliding a sleek envelope across the table. Here, I said. Harper hesitated. What's this? Freedom, I said. Divorce papers. Pre-signed by me, effective immediately. You keep your personal belongings, I keep my peace. Fair trade. She opened the envelope, scanned it, and started shaking her head. You can't just walk away like this. Watch me, I said. Walking away's the one thing I do flawlessly. Ryan grabbed her arm. Come on, let's go. She looked at him, really looked at him, and I could see the flicker of realization. The man she'd ruined her marriage for couldn't even cover dinner if I left first. Her voice cracked again. You'll regret this, Henry. Maybe, I said. But you'll remember it every time someone asks why your diamond necklace has a resale tag. They stormed out, leaving me alone with 2 empty glasses and the faint echo of jazz. I called the waiter over, handed him my card, and said, keep the tip big enough to cover the therapy you'll need after witnessing that circus. He laughed awkwardly. Rough night, sir. Best night of my life, I said. When I stepped outside, the city lights looked brighter. Maybe it was the champagne, maybe it was freedom. My phone buzzed miles. How'd it go? Picture perfect, I said. They walked right into the trap. Beautiful, he said. Want me to initiate the public filings? Do it, I said. Time to make honesty fashionable again. As I hung up, I saw Harper and Ryan across the street arguing near her car. She was yelling. He was gesturing like a man explaining why his credit card declined. Victor stood a few feet away, on his phone, probably begging the devil for legal advice. It was glorious. I got into my own car, rolled down the window, and called out, smile everyone. This'll make a great season finale. Then I drove off into the city night, engine humming like applause. They say revenge doesn't solve anything. Maybe they just never did it properly. If chaos had a soundtrack, it would have played that night. Imagine a jazz band made entirely of car horns, broken promises, and someone repeatedly shouting, lawyer up, at full volume. That's what the signing ceremony turned into after I walked out. I didn't slam the door, didn't raise my voice, didn't even look back, because nothing ruins a perfect exit like secondhand embarrassment. By the time I reached my car, Harper, Victor, and Ryan were already unraveling like cheap sweaters. From the rearview mirror, I saw them standing in the restaurant's parking lot under a flickering streetlight, 3 silhouettes in a live-action cautionary tale. Victor was pacing like a man waiting for a firing squad, phone glued to his ear. Ryan was shouting, because that's what insecure men do when their net worth is emotional debt. And Harper? She was crying, but the dramatic kind of crying, the one where every sob checks to see if there's an audience. It was beautiful, in the way dumpster fires are beautiful when they don't involve your property. I turned the radio on, smiled as Sinatra crooned, "That's life," and thought, yeah, it sure is. The next morning, my phone looked like a war zone. Missed calls, texts, voicemails. One from Harper, "We need to talk." One from Victor, "This is a misunderstanding. Let's resolve privately." And one from Ryan, written entirely in caps like he'd discovered punctuation was optional. "You think you can humiliate me? You'll pay for this." I replied to none, because the moment you respond to chaos, it multiplies. And I'd already multiplied my assets enough for one lifetime. Instead, I made myself coffee, opened the newspaper, and waited for Act 2 of their meltdown to unfold. It didn't take long. At 9:47 a.m., Miles called. "Buddy," he said, laughing so hard he could barely breathe, "they're imploding." Harper called the bank demanding to reverse transfers that don't exist. Victor tried to override them using an outdated power of attorney. And Ryan? Well, Ryan showed up at the branch demanding to speak to the board of directors. The teller called security. I grinned. "You're telling me the man who thought a shell company was a seashell collection just declared war on a trust fund?" Yup, they're losing it. And guess what? The bank flagged Victor's credentials for suspicious activity. Compliance called the Bar Association. I leaned back, sipped my coffee. Beautiful. The circle of poetic justice is complete. By noon, Harper called again. I answered this time, because I was curious to hear what version of the truth she was selling today. "Henry," she said, voice trembling, "we need to fix this. Victor says you can still dissolve the trust if we act fast." "We?" I said. Funny pronoun, considering you spent the last month trying to steal from me. You're blowing everything out of proportion. Am I? Because the IRS agent who called this morning to verify Victor's filings didn't seem to think so. She gasped. You involved the IRS? No, I said cheerfully. Victor did, the moment he committed fraud on a corporate account. You should send him a fruit basket. She went quiet. You could almost hear the sound of her ego deflating. I didn't know he. Stop, I interrupted. Don't insult my intelligence. You forged my signature, Harper. You built an entire fraud scheme with your boyfriend and a crooked lawyer, and you're calling me to fix it? That's like burning down a house and asking the homeowner for marshmallows. Her breathing got heavy. Henry, please. I never meant for it to go this far. I just wanted control, I said. You always did. The money, the company, the story. You wanted to be the genius who outsmarted me. But guess what? You were never playing chess. You were playing Go Fish with a man who built the board. Stop talking like that, she snapped. You're enjoying this. Of course I am, I said. Do you know how rare it is for karma to show up on time? Usually it's like the cable guy, promises to arrive between 8 and never. But today, right on schedule. She sniffed. You'll regret being so smug. Maybe, I said, but you'll regret calling me from a prepaid phone registered to Ryan Calloway's fake company. Nice touch, by the way. Very spy movie of you. Click. She hung up. I laughed so hard my coffee nearly spilled. By 3 p.m., the meltdown went public. Miles texted me a link to an online forum where someone leaked an internal memo from Whitmore Holdings. Victor Haynes under investigation for breach of fiduciary duty. Within an hour, local news picked it up. By dinner, every legal blog within 50 miles had a headline reading, "Family lawyer involved in marital fraud scandal." I swear, I didn't even have to lift a finger. The universe was freelancing for me. Around 6 p.m., June called. So, your wife's on TV. My ex-wife, I corrected. Right? Ex. She's doing this teary-eyed interview about being betrayed by corporate greed. She's really going for the sympathy angle. Of course she is, I said. Did she at least use good lighting? June snorted. You're unbelievable. No, I said. She is. I'm just consistent. June paused. You good, Henry? Better than good, I said. Watching people dig their own graves is the best therapy money can't buy. Just try not to gloat too much, she warned. It's a bad look. I laughed. Trust me, June, I'm not gloating. I'm documenting history. After we hung up, I poured myself a bourbon and sat on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the skyline gold. Somewhere out there, Harper was pacing her apartment, trying to figure out when the script flipped. Probably blaming Ryan, who by now had likely ghosted her for someone with fewer legal problems. Victor was probably talking to his lawyer about plea deals. Me? I was finally relaxed. Then my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Harper standing there, mascara running, hair disheveled, clutching a half-empty bottle of wine like it was emotional support. Can I come in? She asked. I considered it for half a second, enough time to remember every betrayal, every lie, every fake smile. Then I stepped aside. Sure, I said, but coasters are mandatory. She walked in slowly, eyes darting around the apartment like she was visiting a museum dedicated to her own mistakes. It looks the same, she said softly. Yeah, I said, except for the absence of fraud. Henry, please don't do this, she said, sitting on the couch. I made mistakes, but I didn't want to hurt you. That's the problem, I said, pouring her a glass of water instead of wine. You didn't want to hurt me. You just didn't care if you did. She took the glass, stared at it. I lost everything. Not everything, I said. You still have Ryan. She flinched. He's gone. He transferred all the money to his own account and disappeared. Victor's blaming me. The authorities froze my cards. I can't even pay my phone bill. I sat down across from her. Wow. Tragic. And yet, familiar. It's almost like I warned you that greed attracts greed. She wiped her eyes. I know you hate me, but... I cut her off. I don't hate you, Harper. I don't waste hate on people who taught me lessons. You're basically my most expensive seminar. Her voice broke. Can't you help me? Just a little. Help you? I laughed. Harper, last week you tried to erase me from my own legacy. You wanted my house, my company, my life. Now you're sitting in that house, drinking my water, asking for help like it's a favor. The irony's so thick it should be bottled and sold. She stared at me, quiet now, the fight gone. For the first time in years, she looked small. Not glamorous, not powerful, just human. I don't know who I am without all of it, she whispered. Then maybe it's time you find out, I said. She looked up, tears shining. You really won't forgive me? I already did, I said. Forgiveness is cheaper than therapy. But forgetting? That's premium. She nodded slowly, set the glass down, and stood. Goodbye, Henry. Goodbye, Harper. She walked to the door, paused, turned. You win. I smiled faintly. No, I survived. That's better. When she left, the silence felt heavier than before, but not sad. More like the quiet after a storm when you realize your house is still standing. I picked up my phone, texted June. All clear. Hurricane Harper downgraded to a drizzle. She sent back a laughing emoji and a picture of herself holding paint-stained hands like trophies. A few hours later, Miles called again, his voice practically singing. Victory lap time, my man. Victor's law license? Suspended pending investigation. Harper's accounts? Frozen. Ryan Calloway? Reported for identity fraud. It's raining karma. Beautiful, I said. Remind me to send Mother Nature a thank you card. Miles laughed. So what now? You rebuild. Rebuild. I said. Buddy, I never collapsed. When we hung up, I went to the mirror. The man staring back looked lighter. The circles under my eyes were still there, sure, but they belonged to someone who'd finally slept through the night. I raised my glass in a mock toast. To peace, I said, and to the people who thought I'd never find it. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance. One last echo of the storm that had tried to break me. I smiled. Let it rain. My foundation was stronger than ever. And somewhere, in a dim apartment filled with regret and unpaid bills, I hoped Harper finally learned what it felt like to lose something priceless, herself. If you'd told me a few months ago that my life would turn into a financial soap opera where the villain monologues were written by Karma herself, I'd have laughed. But there I was, alive, rich, single, and surprisingly calm. The chaos was over. The credits had rolled. All that was left was the laugh track of irony echoing in the background. And man, it was a beautiful sound. It had been 3 weeks since Harper's grand meltdown tour. 3 glorious weeks of peace, bourbon, and uninterrupted Wi-Fi. My phone, once the hotline for disasters, now buzzed with congratulations. Word had spread. The business world loves gossip more than profit margins, and apparently, rich guy outsmarts cheating wife, corrupt lawyer, and her cologne-soaked side piece was the kind of headline people lived for. Every call started the same way. Henry, you legend, my associate Greg said. How'd you pull it off? Preparation, I'd reply, and an excellent sense of humor. Even my competitors called. We didn't think you had it in you, one CEO laughed. You always seemed so nice. Nice, I said. Yeah, it's my most dangerous weapon. Meanwhile, Harper had vanished from the social circuit faster than a bad investment. Ryan was rumored to be hiding in Arizona, trying to start a financial consulting firm under a new name. Spoiler, that didn't last long. Miles sent me the link when Ryan got arrested for wire fraud 2 days later. Our boy couldn't resist, Miles said, chuckling. Turns out you can't teach old crooks new crimes. Victor? Oh, he was the gift that kept on giving. His law license was officially suspended pending investigation. The Bar Association statement read like poetry. Mr. Haynes' conduct displayed a gross violation of fiduciary trust and ethical duty. Translation: he's now the proud owner of a LinkedIn page that says, open to work. I printed the article, framed it, and hung it in the guest bathroom, right above the toilet. Perfect placement. As for me, I didn't rush to fill the void. People kept asking if I'd start dating again, but the idea of small talk over overpriced appetizers sounded exhausting. Instead, I threw myself back into work. Whitmore Holdings was booming, mostly because I was no longer distracted by domestic espionage. My board members, who had quietly panicked when rumors spread, were suddenly my biggest fans. You handled it like a professional, my CFO said. Please, I told him. It was personal. I just happened to be really good at both. Still, something felt different. Not emptier, just quieter. When you've lived through betrayal at a luxury level, silence feels like therapy. My mornings were mine again. No fake smiles across the breakfast table, no secret texts under napkins, no routine documents slid across candlelit dinners. Just me, my coffee, and the sound of victory steeping. One Thursday afternoon, June called. She'd been running the Whitmore Trust operations flawlessly, turning my act of self-preservation into a movement. So, she said, you're officially the poster boy for financial karma. The foundation's getting donations from all over. Divorce lawyers are quoting your story like scripture. Perfect, I said. I always wanted to be educational. She laughed. We renamed it, by the way. It's now the Whitmore Foundation for Financial Freedom. Tagline. Because some partners need supervision. That's dark, I said. That's justice, she countered. Also, we're hosting a charity gala next month. You're the guest of honor. Guest of honor? I said. June, I hate attention. Liar, she said. You love poetic closure. She wasn't wrong. So a month later, I found myself at the foundation's gala, suit pressed, hair combed, and soul lighter than it had been in years. The event was beautiful. Glass chandeliers, jazz band playing something smooth, and donors drinking expensive champagne to feel generous. June looked radiant in her paint-stained personality wrapped inside a sleek dress. She gave a speech that made the room tear up, talking about empowerment, financial awareness, and protecting yourself from those who mistake kindness for weakness. Everyone applauded. Then she waved me on stage. Now, I hate speeches, but revenge stories deserve encores. So I stepped up, adjusted the mic, and said, thank you, everyone. I'm honored to stand here tonight as proof that stupidity and trust are not the same thing. If you learn anything from my experience, it's this. Love hard, trust carefully, and always hire your own accountant. The room erupted in laughter. I added, also, if your spouse ever slides a document across the dinner table and calls it routine, pretend to choke. By time. More laughter. I bowed slightly and walked off stage to a standing ovation. I'm not saying I felt like a rock star, but if someone had thrown roses, I wouldn't have stopped them. After the speech, people swarmed me. Investors, journalists, even a few women pretending to be financially inspired, but clearly scouting for a rebound billionaire. I smiled, played polite, and made my escape toward the bar. That's when I saw her. Harper, standing at the edge of the room, red lipstick, hair perfectly curled, same confident posture, just duller. Like her sparkle had been repossessed. For a second, I thought she might walk away, but instead she approached, slow, deliberate, the way someone might approach a ghost they weren't sure was real. Henry, she said softly. Harper, I replied, turning to face her. Welcome to my sister's event. I didn't realize guilt was tax deductible. She flinched, but kept her composure. I came to donate, she said. It's a good cause. Oh, definitely, I said. Protecting people from people like you. Full circle moment. She looked down. You look happy. I am, I said simply. Turns out peace pairs well with freedom. She hesitated, then asked, did you ever love me? I smiled faintly. Of course I did. I just stopped once you started loving my assets more than me. She nodded, biting her lip. I deserve that. I sipped my drink. You deserved a lot of things, Harper. Most of them legal fees. For a moment, silence. The kind that carries all the words never said. Then she looked up, eyes glossy but steady. I'm sorry, she said. Not the PR kind of sorry. The real one. I studied her. The apology sounded sincere, which almost annoyed me. Apology accepted, I said. Forgiveness is cheaper than lawyers, remember? That made her laugh. A small, sad laugh that made the room fade for just a second. Then she asked, do you ever think about what we had before all this? Sometimes, I admitted. Usually when I need a reminder of what red flags look like in heels. She smirked faintly. You're cruel. Efficient, I corrected. She took a deep breath. I'm rebuilding, you know. Smaller now. Simpler. No Ryan. No Victor. Just me. Good, I said. Start with honesty. It's underrated. She nodded. You won, Henry. No, I said. I survived. That's better. She smiled one last time, turned, and walked away. I watched her go, not with bitterness, but with something strange, closure, maybe. The kind of calm you get when you finally realize some stories aren't tragedies or comedies. They're lessons. Later that night, June dragged me back on stage to close the gala. Say something profound, she whispered. I took the mic, scanned the crowd, and said, to everyone who's ever been underestimated, thank them. They do half the work for you. And to anyone trying to take advantage of someone's trust, remember, karma has better lawyers. The room roared with laughter. Glasses clinked. The band started playing. June hugged me. When I finally got home, the house felt different. Quieter, but not empty. I poured myself one last drink and wandered to the study, where the framed article of Victor's downfall hung proudly above the fireplace. Beneath it sat the divorce decree, neatly folded beside my bourbon glass. I toasted both. To the aftermath, I said, and the laugh track that comes with it. Then I laughed, loud, free, genuine. Because I wasn't just the man who got even. I was the man who moved on. Months later, life felt like it had finally changed channels. No more scandal, no more lawyers, no more fake smiles across candlelit dinners. Just me, peace, and an absurd amount of silence. The kind you earn. The kind that doesn't demand attention, just presence. Harper was gone. The empire was secure, and my name had become the whispered legend of every boardroom, divorce seminar, and dinner party that ran out of small talk. The man who turned betrayal into a business model. I'll admit, it had a nice ring to it. The Whitmore Foundation thrived under June. She ran it like an unbothered queen, messy bun, coffee in hand, changing lives without checking stock prices. Watching her give interviews about financial autonomy was like watching karma get a publicist. "We're helping people protect their futures," she'd say, while I watched from home, sipping bourbon, thinking, "You're also giving my ex-wife nightmares. But sure, empowerment works too." Then came the gala, again. 1 year later, same chandeliers, new donors. The theme? Rebuilding trust. I laughed so hard when I read the invitation, I nearly framed it. I showed up because June insisted, and because deep down, I wanted to see how it felt to stand in the same room that used to haunt me and realize it no longer could. Closure wears a tuxedo sometimes. I was halfway through my drink when I saw her, Harper. The universe really has a sense of humor. She looked different. Not in a tragic way, just smaller, humbled, like a storm that had finally rained itself out. She walked up slowly, no makeup tricks, no diamond armor. Just her. "Henry," she said softly, almost like a question. "Harper," I said. "Back for the sequel?" She gave a sad smile. "No sequel. I just came to see what you did with everything." I looked around the room. Laughter, music, the soft hum of peace disguised as charity. "Nah," I said. "This is what I did with what was left, self-respect." She nodded, eyes glassy. "You always did have a way with words. And you always had a way with signatures," I said dryly. That earned the faintest laugh. The tension broke. She took a breath. "You know, I thought taking everything would make me feel powerful. But it just made me hollow." "Yeah," I said. "Turns out power without peace is just noise." She hesitated. "Do you ever think we could have made it work?" "Maybe," I said, "if we'd been on the same team. But you were busy recruiting from the enemy's bench." That stung. She nodded. "Fair." Then, softer, "I really am sorry." I studied her for a long second. The old me would have thrown one last jab, but the new me? He'd learned that winning isn't about vengeance, it's about indifference. "Already forgiven," I said. "Forgiveness is cheaper than lawyers." Her lip trembled. "So that's it." "That's it," I said. "You wanted control, I wanted peace. We both got what we asked for, just not how we pictured it." She blinked hard, fighting tears, then smiled faintly. "You're happier now." "I am," I said. "Mostly because you're not around to ruin my pasta." That actually made her laugh. A real laugh, small but honest. For a moment, I saw the woman I fell in love with before greed rewired her. Then she whispered, "Goodbye, Henry." "Goodbye, Harper," I said. She walked away, shoulders straight, no performance this time. Just acceptance. And for the first time, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt gratitude. Because some people teach you how to love. Others teach you where not to spend it. The night went on. June gave another powerful speech. Donors clapped. Champagne flowed. But I didn't stay for long. I left early, took the scenic route home. The city looked softer now, like it had forgiven me too. When I got back, I stood by the window of my study, the same place where this whole war had started. On the desk sat the framed newspaper clipping about Victor's disbarment, the photo of June at the foundation's opening, and one old picture of Harper and me back when things were simple. I didn't hate it. I didn't even move it. It reminded me of something valuable. That peace isn't free. You earn it one heartbreak at a time. I poured myself a drink and toasted the air. "To endings," I said, "and to the fools who make them worth it." Outside, a car drove past playing an old Sinatra tune. Fitting. They say revenge is sweet. I disagree. Revenge is dessert, satisfying, temporary. Peace. That's the main course. But still, watching Harper drive off that night in a used car while my sister toasted to freedom? Yeah, that was dessert.